Welcome to Pick Me Up, I'm Scared, the podcast.
I'm your host, Madeline.
And I'm your co-host, David.
And David, today we are doing the second part of our second two-parter.
Yeah, this is exciting. The National Endowment for Democracy. Hey, do you want to do a catch-up of what we learned last time?
Yeah, so what we learned last time is that they're like the CIA, but smaller. And when everybody started to catch on to the CIA being up to I'm going to call them coup shenanigans all over the planet.
Coup shenanigans. Coonanigan. That sounds like a twee band.
Yeah.
The sort of twee band that gets Havana syndrome.
Exactly. They are the more twee version of the CIA. We did agree on that last time we did an episode. So that checks out. So they're up to coonanigans, the CIA all over the planet. And then people started to catch on. And then the US government was like, oh my God, how do we do CIA things without people knowing it's the CIA? And then they invented this NGO, non-governmental organization, in name only, that is actually very governmental, that gets all of its funding from the US government, most of it anyway, and whose board of directors are all people who work for the CIA and other high up government agencies.
I like to think that there's like one like extremely dumb rich guy who's like, NGO, I need a place to put my money, and is like just like sending like the NED like a check every month, and they're like, I don't know why, but we just got this like one dude, Bob, who's just like,
the CIA actually had their equivalent of that with like Rockefeller.
Yeah, and they were getting their funding from a lot of weird places with the BCCI or whatever it was called.
Yeah, he was like helping the CIA even like do the art laundering thing with like the abstract expressionist art, because he was on the board at the MoMA. So I'm sure Ned has their own mini cuter twee version of Rockefeller helping them out too.
No, I'm not saying there's like some like private benefactor, but there's just like one guy who's like right, if you like looked at the NED's budget, it would be like 0.1% or something.
Oh,
but there's just one guy who's like, it's like tax deductible, man.
Right. He doesn't know what they're up to, and he's just like, I can donate money. Yay.
Not NGO, those are good, right?
Right. Okay. Well, if you guys didn't listen to part 1 of the episode, it's really one you should go back and listen to. This episode will make less sense if you have not heard the first one. So we are going to do just our minor bookkeeping before we launch into part 2, but I think we're going to get into part 2 pretty fast and hit it hard. So you'll want to be all caught up. So if you haven't heard it already, go back and listen to the last episode. It's a doozy, and this one is going to be even gnarlier.
Okay. So bookkeeping, where are you going on your book tour?
Okay, so the book tour, we're doing some new dates for our book tour. So far, we have 3 dates figured out. We have Brooklyn on Friday, May 17th at Powerhouse Arena. We have Philadelphia, Sunday, May 19th at Harriet's Bookshop, which I'm excited about because everybody says Harriet's is really cool. When I told people like, hey, we're going to Harriet's, everyone's like, oh, I love Harriet. So I'm excited about that. I do love Philadelphia. Have you been to Philadelphia, David?
I have. I love Philadelphia from afar. Right. Like anytime someone says water ice to me, it's like that is my version of Bruce Madeline. Like it's due to like a deep like memory type spot. Hi, Fork.
Yeah, sorry, Fork is here as always, just to disrupt the recording process. She's getting a little better though. I think that Philadelphia, I feel very connected to it. And I think it's because we're from Fresno, and Philadelphia is like the same kind of place as Fresno.
I'm going to just like respectfully, it's like the opposite kind of place. It is an eastern seaboard old city that had like fucking Ben Franklin in it. There's a giant bell there. It is known globally for their sandwiches.
I did get a really good vegan cheesesteak last time I was there. Yeah.
I don't even know what that is.
A vegan Philly cheesesteak?
I mean, it feels like it defeats the purpose of the Philly cheesesteak, but you.
That was delightful. I can tell you, no purposes were defeated. That was a delicious sandwich.
Things made of cashews, I'm assuming.
Yeah, there's probably some cashews in there. Yeah, probably. But you couldn't
tell. You made me eat a vegan bagel and cream cheese once, and the whole thing felt wrong.
You didn't even know it was vegan until I told you.
No, I knew from the second, as I told you then, if you had not told me it was vegan, I would have said this is a mediocre bagel with cream cheese because it doesn't have all the things about a bagel and like the slight tartness and tanginess. Cream cheese gone, and the bagel flat
Okay.
bagel.
No, well, you know what? We don't even have real bagels out in California anyway.
Oh, there are people presumably right this second waiting in a line around the damn block at Courage Bagels who would disagree with you.
I mean, I don't know. I'm constantly told that it's not in our purview to make a bagel in California.
I feel this is California slander.
Okay, well, you know what? I think that Philadelphia and Fresno are very similar. It is true. We don't have the Big Bell, but we do have several Taco Bells. And I feel like that is like a one-to-one replacement. Like if you run out of something in a baking recipe and you just need to replace it, Liberty Bell, Taco Bell, very similar.
Have you ever been to one of their like weird bar, like the Taco Bell Cantina?
Yes, I have. I have been to Taco Bell, and of course I have.
That was shocking to me. Like drinking alcohol with your like and not like.
So would you say then, since there's no cantina at the Liberty Bell, that the Taco Bell replacement in Fresno is actually better? I think it's actually an improvement upon the Liberty Bell.
I mean, I think, right, like I think the Taco Bell, I'm just saying Fresno, I tried to explain Fresno to someone who was from like I think she grew up in Greenwich Village. And so it was like, I don't even know, like there's no reference for you. Like you grew up in a city, you lived your whole life. And I was like, look, you know, when you go to those like West Coast places that are like a name on a map and it's just endless subdivisions. It's Fresno, like there's like,
you know, see, I think the attitude and the spirit, I think we have the same fighting spirit, you know, hockey, we all love hockey. Fresno.
I do. I will say the difference is the reason you go to the ice skating rink in Fresno is it is summer and it is 115 degrees.
That is true. That part
and
is
you're
true.
Like, we got to get out of this.
Well, I think that there's a lot in common, like with Philadelphia. We don't look the same in Fresno. Like the cities don't look the same, but like if the city had a personality, it is the same. The personality is like, I will fight you over a parking spot.
I mean, that's like I think like the impending civil war in America will not start over like political grievances, but because someone in like Pilsen in Chicago or K-Town in Los Angeles, like, you know, missed a parking spot because someone double parked. That's how it's going to start.
Yes.
That is one of the universal factors about America.
Despite your naysaying, I still do feel a kindred connection with Philadelphia. I think that Fresno is like just an uglier Philadelphia, and I really feel at home there. So I'm excited to go because it's kind of like a different going home. So speaking of going home, I'm also doing a date in Santa Cruz. So on May 28th, I'll be at Bookshop Santa Cruz.
But I love how, speaking of going home to a place, well, I guess you lived in Aptos.
I lived in Aptos. Yeah. I ran away from Fresno to live with a drug dealer when I was a teenager. And he told me that he didn't have an apartment in Santa Cruz, but he could probably rent one if I moved there. And then he told me he rented an apartment in Santa Cruz, but he turned out to rent this room in Aptos, which is like 10 minutes away. It's like one city over basically from Santa Cruz. And it was the wildest house I've ever lived in. It was like this super 70s split level house, like 2 stories, but like the basement level was just a garage nobody had access to. And then like 2 crummy bedrooms with like bad peeling carpet in them, connected with a Jack and Jill bathroom. But then upstairs looked like a 70s porno, like shag heaven. Like there was this like retro fireplace in the middle, and it had this like 360 deck and like these views of like Santa Cruz and the coastline. I mean, it was beautiful upstairs.
Yeah, no, I visited you there. It was beautiful. It was like a 10-minute walk to the beach.
It was amazing. Yeah. But upstairs was inhabited by a professional snowboarder who thankfully wasn't home most of the time. But when he was home, he would sit on the couch and just play Anchorman on repeat all day long, getting high.
I remember that boyfriend and his bandmates doing close 3-part harmonies to Weezer while I was there,
That
and
sounds right. Yeah.
I remember wondering like how did any like I've made a wrong turn somewhere.
Oh no,
What?
those guys were delightful. First of all, they had a parody like 80s metal band called Nail Gun with two N's at the end, and they all dressed up like construction workers and wrote fake metal songs about like power tools. That was like pretty good. Yeah. They also had like I want to say a white guy rap group, but they weren't all white. My boyfriend was white, but they were called the Harsh Mellows. And unfortunately, they were really good at rapping, which should not, I was shocked to see that. And they were
Mhm.
not all white, so I can't even fault them for it. You know, it was a pretty like Spanish textbook diverse looking group of people in that. You know how like in Spanish text
Yeah.
it would be like very pointedly diverse. Yeah, it was
Mhm.
like that. So, you know, he had some shining moments. He was an interesting character in my life.
Well,
You
so
could probably read
speaking
about
of
in my
going home, well, I'm
yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, that was my segue back to book tour talk.
Oh, speaking of going home, what, you're not going home?
Okay, well, here's the thing about Fresno is
There's
that
no
there's nowhere with a big enough space to do a reading. So I can only do a signing in Fresno apparently, but we're trying to work out the date for that. So
what's
probably
the
be
go to the
early
plant
June.
store.
The what?
The plant store.
It's the plant
Ga-
store.
Gazebo Garden.
Gazebo Gardens. Oh, I thought it was called the plant store. No, Gazebo Gardens would be cute. I mean, these events we have had like 300 people showing up at them.
Okay, so what is it, the Rainbow Room?
Yeah, we're gonna do it in a dive
You
bar in
you
Fresno.
you and Morrissey will share something in common.
Same stage. Yeah, we're gonna do it at a shitty venue slash dive bar in Fresno.
I really hope. Okay, that's not. I don't know. The main thing I remember about the Rainbow Room was that when they weren't hosting like Morrissey or like a third rate like has been skate punk band, like those were the two types of things that it was like mariachi groups.
Oh yeah,
Right.
totally. There's a lot of mariachi. Love the mariachi. Okay, well, whatever the case, these are the events we have hammered out so far. We've got Brooklyn, we've got Philadelphia, we've got Santa Cruz. We're working on Fresno. So check out the locations and figure out if you need to reserve a ticket, if you like need to buy a book or whatever. Most of them they're free, but they want you to just like do a head count so they know what to expect because the events have been really big, like standing room only at one place. Like they've had to pull us out of their normal event spaces and just like basically shut down the bookstore to accommodate us. So it is really important to go see if these bookstores in particular have any like wants or requests in terms of getting a head count. If you have to RSVP, if you have to register, please do that. It helps the people working at the bookstore so they know what to prepare for. So again, Brooklyn, May 17th, Powerhouse Arena. Philadelphia, May 19th, Harriet's Bookshop. Santa Cruz, May 28th, Bookshop Santa Cruz. And we're working on a Fresno signing date as we speak, as well as some other locations too.
That sounds great.
Um,
I love the idea. Speaking of going home, not your home. Aptos, not your home. Santa
well,
Cruz.
no, but it was for a while. It
This
was,
is
I did live there for a little bit.
this is like me saying, speaking of going home, St. Anthony, Idaho.
No, it is. Yes. But
Yeah.
that was your home for a little bit, right?
I don't actually like to remember that period of my life. I
Okay.
don't know
All
why I
right.
brought it up.
Well, to each their own. Okay.
Yeah.
So the other bookkeeping thing we have, or housekeeping thing besides the book, is the Patreon. We are working on getting our 2 bonus episodes up for the month. We've had some setbacks this month. Life happens to us, and that's normal.
Yeah.
So we do strive for 100% consistency, but you'll notice we miss a week here and there. We missed a week last week. We're recording this one a little late because life is messy. But over on the Patreon, we are working on a great bonus episode for this week, and then we'll do another one next week before the month is up. And this week's is about like Southern California conservative movements, which I think is going to be interesting. David, you did the research on this.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited about it. My pitch for the damn thing. We live in Southern California. Uh I feel like, well, speaking of St. Anthony, I'll tell you a short story about this. So when I lived in St. Anthony, there was this guy who kept being like, "You're from California, you're a city boy." And I kept being like, "No, you don't understand. I'm from Fresno." It's like not like you think you have this like very particular idea of what being from California is. And that's actually not, like, it's a very deeply conservative place. Even the Democrats are often like deeply conservative people. And like, we
Well,
are,
Fresno County, but Fresno City is a little more progressive.
I would say, put it this way, the political power structure in Fresno is insanely conservative. Our mayor was played a sheriff on In the Heat of the Night
Yes,
at
he
one
did. He was an
point.
actor. Yeah. We have that going on. We have the Reagan actor thing. We had our mayor. What was his name
I can't really, I know I went to school at that like weird Christian place with his daughter, who's a real asshole.
again? Yeah.
Uh, and like I don't know, but like Southern California and like Orange County in particular, but like California is kind of where like the specific modern form of grassroots conservatism like kind of took form in a lot of ways. And I think it kind of doesn't jibe with a lot of people's like impression of California. And so I
Yeah.
think like going like think I mean like if you know any like surf Nazis and all the like Huntington
Yes.
Beach or whatever, it won't be totally surprising to you, but like
Yeah, no, I think it's a really interesting thing. I often tell people on the internet, I don't understand why why California got the reputation of being so progressive, because literally half of the mayors in our lifetime have been Republicans,
yeah, and even like right, the Democrat like what Garcetti? Oh, you're talking about governors, but like
I'm talking
Garcetti,
about governor. Sorry,
like
not mayors.
our old mayor in Los Angeles was I can't even remember the guy's first, like Garcetti, who was like a shithead.
I think it was Eric Garcetti. Yeah.
Yeah, like not, like very in the hands of the developers kind of guy. And
Right.
like a Democrat, but like it's not
He's
like
like,
the
hey, cool it. We need gay people to buy our houses sometimes.
yeah, and like the mayor in the 60s was like a New Deal Democrat who like more or less took all of this war on poverty funding and gave it to his like political donors. And like
Yeah,
it's
and Southern California thing is it is really wild. Huntington Beach is notoriously a white supremacist place, especially in like the California punk scene. So I think it'll be a really interesting episode.
yeah,
Okay, well, I think that's all we have for our intro, and I think we can jump straight into this.
the Ned.
The NED, the National Endowment for Democracy. So again, listen to the first episode if you haven't already. And so if you made it this far, I assume you're caught up. So we're just going to jump straight into Haiti.
All right, what happened in Haiti?
So in the year 2000, Jean-Bertrand Aristide won 92% of the vote in Haiti's 2000 presidential election, right? So he was part of this like left-leaning political party called Lavalas, and they won 80% of the seats in the House Assembly as well.
So like real popular mandate.
Yeah, very, very popular and left-leaning. So Lavalas and Aristide specifically, do you have a way you like to pronounce this man's name? Have you heard of it?
No.
I've heard people pronounce it differently. I've heard Aristide. I've heard Aristide. I think that like Aristide's probably good. So maybe I'll go with that. So Lavalas and Aristide emphasized having like a strong social safety net in Haiti, basically. They're like, we want to build schools, we want to build infrastructure, we want to help support the rural poor. And that's why they were so popular with so many people. But if you know anything about the United States, this sounds exactly like the kind of shit we get so livid about when it happens in other countries. We're like, how dare you help your poor? You should be helping us, foreign capital in your region. So Aristide also wanted to raise the minimum wage for workers who were sewing Americans' clothes, basically. This was a time when a lot of apparel manufacturers were like opening their own factories down there.
So is it like a subcontracting thing?
No, subcontracting is usually a different thing. So subcontracting would be like if I was like, hey, David, I really want you to make this shirt for me. And you were like, yeah, I can make this shirt for you. Don't worry about it. It's going to cost you $20 a shirt. And I was like, cool. And then you took that and then you went to somebody else and you were like, hey, I really want you to make this shirt for me. I'll give you $10 an hour to do it. That's how the subcontracting works. So this would be different. This would be like, maybe an American company going and opening up their own factory in another country and trying to get away with cheaper labor there than they would have to in their home country. Maybe maybe they have a different company name that they opened it under, but it really is the same company, or maybe it is just a third party who is working exclusively with these American, kind of garment manufacturers. So basically Haiti at the time had a bunch of garment workers there who were sewing Americans' clothes. And he was like, we need a minimum wage. These people are getting exploited, basically. And a lot of the kind of like Western influence there was like, no, you guys should have a small government. What do you want with a minimum wage? Very like how we think of libertarians in the United States
Have
today.
you heard of this guy Milton?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. The Western powers were like, we got to get Milton Friedman in this place ASAP. And if you haven't heard our Milton Friedman episode, you really should. It is a doozy. I think it's called Milton Friedman, Enfant Terrible or whatever. Terrible. I don't.
Yeah.
Terrible. You know, I'm just a simple Fresno kid. I can't do
the French language defeats you every time.
It really does. So the other thing though that was going on is he wanted, like I said, that investment in education, but also like things in healthcare that really were conflicting with internationally what people were doing in Haiti. It was a period of a lot of rapid resource extraction in Haiti from colonizing powers. So this was bad. And this is the kind of thing we hear time and time again. This happens a lot with the CIA, for example, when you have these countries that are being heavily exploited by colonizing Western powers. The second they're like, this has to stop. You guys are coming in here, you're exploiting our laborers, you're killing our people, you're taking all of our natural resources, you're destroying our country. Let's have some ground rules here. This is when usually the United States government is like, we have to get involved to make sure you do not defend yourselves at all. And you continue to just let us take whatever we want from you. So historically, this would be something the CIA would have gotten involved in. You know, when we think about this, we think about South America, we think about Allende, we think about people like Mossadegh, right, and Iran. And we have episodes about both of these things if you look back through our old episodes to like get up to speed on what the CIA was doing there. But basically what the CIA was doing is these leaders of these countries would be like, whoa, like cool it. You guys just can't come in here and do whatever you want. And the CIA would assassinate democratically elected leaders who were trying to make those changes, overthrow them, and instead install puppet governments that were sympathetic to Western needs. So
fucking the CIA man.
Huh?
Oh, yeah, you're not a big fan of the thugs?
No, yeah, no.
Fucking A, the CIA man.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, I think like I really want to get a neck tattoo that says I hate the CIA. So that's what I'm working on.
Can you do it in bubble letters? I've told you about the guy with the bubble letter. Anytime I like. Also, this is a weird aside. The last time we recorded in person, you had like a star on your forehead.
I had a pimple patch on, a star face.
Yeah, I know, but I was
very
like,
common thing.
I had never seen this before, and I kept, my eyesight's not great, and the whole time I kept being like, Madeline got a face tattoo. Madeline got a face tattoo. Madeline, like,
it's not off brand for me.
It's not on brand.
I think it's not on brand. Well, okay, whatever the case, this is the stuff the CIA used to do. But remember, Ned is like, now we do everything the CIA used to do. So Haiti instantly becomes a point of concern for the National Endowment for Democracy, Ned, right? And this is where you really hear, you're like, how are they a non-governmental organization when their main issue here is that this is offensive to American corporate powers who are backing American politicians financially? Like, this is their motivation for getting involved. Clearly, it's heavily tied to our government structure. So they also were like in Haiti starting to drum up a campaign to request $21 billion from France as like back owed restitution from the independence debt that France basically extorted from them in 1825 because Haiti was a colony of France. And famously, Haiti had like one of the most successful slave rebellions.
The only, and like Toussaint Louverture, like one of like the greats of like world history, led basically the only successful slave rebellion.
Yes. Yeah. And so this is Haiti's history, and so successful that Haiti's history, like the success of Haiti's rebellions against slavery and colonization, terrified American powers so much that that's, I believe, part of how the United States really became motivated to divide the poor and the working class by race further. Like Bacon's rebellion is what started it, but the Haiti rebellion terrified them too. And they were like, we really got to make sure that the poor Black people and the poor white people feel like they're different so they don't come together. So Haiti had this famous rebellion, and they declared their independence, and France was like, well, you got to give us $21 billion then, because look at all the money we're missing out on from you not being our colony anymore.
Yeah.
So they had this left-leaning party, right? Like Lavalas and Aristide, and they were like, you need to give us that back. That what the fuck was that? Give us back our money, France, which
Yeah.
rightfully so,
No,
right?
I mean, like, first of all, a debt from 1820, come on.
Yeah, wild. So the election was pretty much called like a great success for the Haitian population, right? International election observers were like, this was a very free and clear election. This was a very real election. These people were just really, really popular here. But there were opposition parties, like mostly made up of the rich people in Haiti, who were like, no, there's no way these people could have won 92% of the vote or 80% of the vote in the House Assembly. It has to be fake. So they started contesting the election results. And they said that there were 8 senatorial seats that should have instead gone to a runoff vote. So Ned sees this opportunity and they get to work. So they start funding those rich guy opposition groups within Haiti in an attempt to, of course, destabilize their democracy and support a coup against Aristide in favor of installing a more right-wing, pro-American leader who would just privatize everything and pave the way basically for American business to make more money in Haiti. So one of these groups was called Democratic Convergence. And this was a coalition of 200 political organizations that were all opposed to Aristide's political agenda. So read rich guys who would have been adversely affected by this. We're talking mostly industrialists, bankers, importers. And this was founded a few months after Aristide's election victory in the year 2000, and it was funded heavily by the National Endowment for Democracy, NED. It was led by this former Port-au-Prince mayor, Evans Paul, like back when we were talking about like corruption days and just like leadership being in the pocket of Western financial interests. This is this guy. It was founded by Stanley Lucas, who openly talked about just assassinating Aristide in radio interviews. He was like, we should just kill this guy, like very, very vocally. The political opposition to the left-wing Lavalas, like no matter what they were interested in, they were all united under this now, American government-funded Democratic Convergence Group. DC is what they're sometimes abbreviated to. And what they were really calling for was the complete annulment of the May elections, despite the fact that every international group was like, these were fair and good elections. So that was one group, but there were different groups who kind of had different interests too. Like there was another group called the Group of 184. This had some members of the Democratic Convergence, like overlapping, but not all of them. And it was headed by an industrialist named Andy Appiah Jr. And they paid paramilitary right-wing gangs in Haiti to terrorize and murder Lavalas supporters, basically. There was also these two groups that are like a lot of letters. You're going to hear a lot of letters here. There was RNDDH or NCHR Haiti. This is like the same group, but they had to change their name at a certain point. So depending on when you're talking about them, this group, though, was styled as a human rights organization, but it was funded just by Ned. So the director was Pierre Esperance, and they were instrumental in this huge propaganda campaign that was trying to frame Aristide as a dictator, despite him having won, 92% of the popular vote. So they were manufacturing fake reports that tried to frame the Lavalas Prime Minister, Yvonne Neptune. Because remember, it wasn't just that the president was from this party, like the whole House Assembly, right? So the Prime Minister too. So they were trying to say that the Lavalas Prime Minister, Yvonne Neptune, had led an alleged massacre in a like small town in Haiti that was made up mostly of people who were like loyal to the kind of Western backed previous government. And this guy, Brian Concanon, who was the director of the Institute for Justice and Democracy in Haiti, remarked at the time during an interview with a jurist that NCHR Haiti, again, sorry, lots of letters, this group was a ferocious critic of Aristide's government and an ally of the illegal regime, which referred to people who were living in Haiti trying to basically overthrow the democratically elected government to do rich guy government instead. So Concanon also said that persecution became like so flagrant that NCHR Haiti's former parent organization, which was New York based, publicly was like, you guys have to change your name. And that is actually what caused them to change their name to RNDDH, right?
Wait,
so,
okay.
Yeah.
RADDH stands for?
We'll never know. There's no way to know. I could Google it, but I didn't because it was a lot.
Don't worry about it. So
overwhelming.
wait, is there like a kernel of truth to the massacre thing, or is it just it's
Well, there was an incident that occurred that we will get into, and I will
okay?
explain it in detail. Ariel Henry, though, was also a member of these groups that was funded by Ned. And Ariel Henry is the current acting prime minister of Haiti to this day.
Mhm.
So we'll see that the US government actually was successful in getting our own guys set up in Haiti after this. So on June 8th, 2001, 7 of those 8 disputed senators in those Senate seats that was like the only thing that people could even kind of point to where they're like, that should have been a runoff vote maybe for these 8 people. 7 of them just stepped down following pressure from Aristide. He was like, you know what, just it's not worth it. Just step down. It's going to be fine. We have such a majority. Like, it's okay. So the DC maintained that Aristide still needed to resign, and that instead they would have this like unelected transitional government in his place, which if you've heard anything about how the CIA moves, this is like CIA textbook, right? But this is the Democratic Convergence, that group of rich business dudes who are calling for this.
Anytime you hear transitional government, that's just, it's not a good sign.
It's really not. I just completed the Hunger Games movies.
Yeah, I was wondering what you sent me about something totally unrelated. You were like, the odds were not in your favor. And I was like, I was like, what the fuck, Madeline?
No, I just started watching the Hunger Games movies. Yeah. There is definitely a transitional government reference in there, though. And I was like, I gotta say, Hunger Games movies, better than I expected.
They're fun. I feel like it gets bogged. It's a
Did
lot
you
of.
watch them?
Yes, of course I watched the.
I had never seen them until like the airplane. I was like on an airplane and I was like, what's this? I'll watch this.
It's not as like it's not as exciting. It gets boring really quickly. That was what I found.
Oh, okay. Well, by June 8th, right, 2001, the year after the election, we have those 7 of the 8 senators stepping down, but we have the Democratic Convergence still being like, we need a transitional government. Yeah, which is usually just code word for we need people with no accountability who can just take over with no term limits, and we'll just figure it out as we go along. By September 4th, 2002, the following year, new resolutions were adopted by the Organization of American States, OAS, requiring the Haitian government to give the totally unelected group of rich guys, the Democratic Convergence, a veto ability on all aid disbursements, which is wild.
So basically, okay, so by aid disbursements, are these like coming from like international organizations, or is this like the Haitian government?
It's coming from a lot of international locations, including the US. So the USA is basically like, if okay, we'll give you money, but you got to let these rich guys say what to do with it. So it's like clearly a very buddy deal for the money.
And it's essentially just like, why don't you just give the money to the rich? Like,
yeah, give it straight to the rich guys. I mean, they're doing that too. They're giving money to the rich guys too. So then the following year after that, by 2003, Haiti's budget by this point enters like a total chokehold. Regular aid received by European countries and like Canada and the United States just like stopped. Like all these places stopped giving Haiti the aid that they had been because they were like, no, we don't fuck with your left-wing government there. Like, no, this isn't okay. So we're basically strong arming them into having a right-wing government that lets Western powers exploit them if we want to continue to like have the sweet buddy deal of the aid that we've been having. So Haiti ended up using more than 90% of its cash reserves to pay off $32 million in debt to these international creditors, people not from there. And the budget for Haiti ended up having to get slashed as a result of that. Because like, we have no money because we had to deal with all this international bullshit that we didn't expect to deal with, all this pressure from all these white Western countries. So Ned then went in and funded more opposition groups in Haiti to seize this opportunity of cut social spending and politically agitate, doing what we heard them do in the last episode, where they like create fake protests and try to incentivize people to like, you know, make pamphlets and flyers talking about how terrible the government was. And they did create a few small protests in 2003 in Haiti that to an outside observer would have looked like an organic Haitian uprising against their government, but was actually the US government faking one there to benefit some rich guys. So the following year, 2004, 100,000 Haitians ended up protesting in favor of maintaining the Lavalas government. They were like, oh, we don't know where these rich people are coming from, but we like our government and we want it to stay. And in February of that year, an anti-government militia established a curfew in the town of La Sierra. So remember we talked about the alleged massacre?
Okay.
These are the details of what happened. It was a right-wing neighborhood that opposed the left-wing presidency. So we had this anti-government militia go in there to kind of an area that was sympathetic to them and establish a curfew. So they had these militants that barricaded the main access roads to this neighborhood. And on the morning of the 11th of February of 2004, pro-government forces came and they took down the barricades and they entered the neighborhood and they were like, what are you guys doing? Like, you can't do this.
Okay, so I just want to like be clear on what's going on here. Essentially, this like one neighborhood that presumably there's maybe a little richer.
The Huntington Beach of Haiti, I'm guessing.
The Huntington Beach, surf Nazis must die wherever they are.
Right, to tie in with our bonus episode that's coming out soon.
But are like they've basically created like a little mini fortress of like, and they're like, oh, curfew, but it basically means like, hey, this is now us. This is like an anti-government spot.
Right. And the government's like, you can't do that. You don't get to just stop being Haiti.
Yeah.
No, you're Haiti, you're us. So they come in and they take down the barricades. So an armed confrontation at this point obviously ensues. And witnesses are like anywhere between 2 to 12 people were killed. So remember, these witnesses were anti-government, right-wing people who did not like the government at all and were probably realistically working with Ned. But reports were super inconsistent about what they saw. So some people were like, I saw 2 people die. Some people were like, I saw 12 people die, but they'd be like describing the same incident. They also, though, all reported that there was a government helicopter present, but it did not fire on anyone. So that is the consistent thing we know, is that the government had a helicopter and could have killed a lot of people, but they didn't fire a single shot.
Yeah.
So this, though, was like a confusing story to follow. And Ned was able to obviously use this as a huge propaganda talking point, and people became very like unclear about what actually happened. So on March 2nd, like less than a month later, there's a coup against Haiti's, yes, democratically elected president, Jean-Bertrand Aristide. And it was backed and funded by the United States through Ned. So the NCHR issued this shaky report saying that Neptune, the prime minister, had committed a genocide against political opponents in that small right-wing town on February 11th.
Wait, I'm sorry. We'll get back. A genocide. That is.
Yes, I know. Big use
of a liberal use of the word genocide.
Even at the high estimates, people who were like, I saw 12 people getting killed, which like that can't even be corroborated. That would still be wild. But this report said 50 people were killed. So now the numbers are just jumping. Yeah, we're not sure. I'm sure somebody probably died. There was an armed conflict, but like,
yeah, but 50,
these numbers are like, coming out of nowhere, you know?
Yeah, that's that. Like 50 people died is like a wholly different situation.
Yes. So NCHR director Pierre Esperance was like, I heard about it on the radio. That's where I'm getting the news from. So then 2 NCHR delegates arrived on scene February 13th. This was just 2 days after this incident happened. And they were like, we saw 5 or 6 corpses. So again, not 50, not 12. And somebody else said they only saw 2 people die. So like, we're not even sure if that's real or what the truth is. These numbers are all over the place. But when, you know, finally this report comes out and it's like, no, 50 people died. They didn't have names of these 50 people. Nobody was named. But they did name just 8 people. They were able to come up with 8 people. So experts were like, well, these 8 guys were anti-government dudes who are in an armed conflict with the government. Like this was an insurrection, basically. These are the 8 men who died. So 8 is kind of what people landed on as being maybe the most probable number for what happened here. But this was all getting kind of game of telephone style, told and retold. The 8 numbers jumped up to 50, jumped up to massacre, jumped up to genocide. And by the time we get to March 2nd, there's a full-on coup against the president. So groups of rebel soldiers penetrated the Capitol and they arrested Lavalas sympathizers. And then they used this alleged massacre as justification for arresting members of the government, including the Prime Minister, Yvonne Neptune, also the Minister of Justice, the Interior Minister, and the National Police Chief. So Gerard Latourtou took control of like basically these government functions backed by the United States. And this launched into this period of time where massive human rights abuses occurred. And this is what we see when the United States overthrows a democratically elected leader and we put in some right-wing puppet government, it usually is followed by very, very destructive, horrifying, violent periods of time where
I'm
these
gonna say,
Hmm.
when you don't even have to put the democratically elected thing. Like there are leaders that like when I read about, I'm like, oh, that guy doesn't sound great. But the thing that came after, like if America does a coup there,
Yeah,
or something, like right, it's like no matter what the situation is before we got there, we made it worse.
we do make it worse. I think the democratically elected thing is important in the context of just NED because they are
Yeah,
the National Endowment for Democracy. So, and it affects how
yeah.
we think about democracy in the United States. It's this obviously this branding term that doesn't mean anything. But when you really think about what the National Endowment for Democracy is doing, they're fighting against democracy. They're really
The,
the National Endowment against democracy. They're a NAD, not a
the
NED.
need.
A need. Oh, yeah, need. Yeah, that's better. Yeah. So Esperance and the RNDDH ended up working closely with La Tortue, the dictator, to target and jail thousands of Lavalas supporters. And the NCHR Haiti, right, the RNDDH, that group that had to change its name, they had an agreement with a head prosecutor in Port-au-Prince by which any individual accused by Esperance and the NCHR Haiti and RNDDH, sorry, the letters, would be subject to persecution. So basically, they have this deal where they were like, if Esperance says that you were a traitor, like you're a traitor and we get to do whatever we want to you, basically.
Okay.
So this was in the aftermath of this kind of government hostile takeover. So according to a Council on Hemispheric Affairs, which is COHA, lots of letters, this report they countless individuals, many whose only crime was a loose affiliation with Aristide's Family Lavalas party, were arrested by the interim government based on false accusations entered by the NCHR Haiti.
Mhm.
So Yvonne Neptune, the prime minister, gets imprisoned for 2 years. And he said that most of the people who were dragged into the penitentiary were sympathizers of Lavalas, coming from the underprivileged areas of the city. They were arrested really in bundles, he said. They would come every day, and they were mistreated. So he's like in prison, he gets arrested for allegedly committing a genocide. 8 people are named, everyone's confused. They were in armed conflict trying to overthrow the government at the time. And he's like, look, everybody else who's coming in here, it's like truckloads of poor people who just wanted like a school and a hospital, basically.
Yeah.
Right. These aren't political heavy hitters. These aren't bad people. They're just
I mean, it's class warfare.
yeah, it's
Right?
class
Like
warfare.
it's basically, but it's like, well, it's democratic, which I feel like National Endowment for Democracy is really about protecting the interests of the wealthy.
Of the wealthy, exactly.
Right.
Aristide himself gets exiled. I'm guessing they were like, if we kill him, it's just going to cause an even bigger uprising. So they exile him. Now, meanwhile, the United States government officially denies a coup has taken place. And they're like, we had no role in this. It wasn't a coup. It's like very like, it wasn't a coup, but if it was, we didn't do it. And we didn't force him to exile. He just chose to leave, right?
That sometimes you get into a position that you're like, it's what's the Peter principle or whatever, the thing where you like rise above your status. They're just saying, or like above your capability. Aristide was just like, look, he got a little out of his depth. He needed a vacation.
This was the American approach. Yeah, they're like,
Yeah.
something really happened here. What? But it's like very obviously you had a guy who was resistant to letting American interests trample all over the country of his people. And you were like, that's inconvenient. And then what? Like within 3 years, he's bye gone. And you suddenly have these like pro-Western business dudes in charge of the country. And now the money's flowing again and everything's going great. And all the protests were orchestrated by a US.
Yeah, that was my next question. Did all of the international funding and presumably like World Bank style like shitty loans suddenly I'm assuming the spigot turned back on?
Well, the spigot turned back on from the United States for sure, but like you said, whenever these coups happen, things don't get better. Things don't get easier.
Yeah.
Things get real weird. And things definitely were getting real weird. So in March, that same month of the coup, 6,000 Haitians were arrested and many people were killed, just murdered. So then the United States lobbied the UN to deploy 8,000 what they call peacekeepers to control the situation in Haiti, which, yeah, if you guys don't know that, like, first of all, the United States like pulls the strings of the UN heavily, and the UN has these quote unquote peacekeepers. It's really an army. It's an army.
The blue helmet guys.
The blue helmet guys, if you've ever seen the photos of war areas. Yes.
Mhm.
So they ended up, the UN created the United Nations Stabilization Mission in Haiti, or again, I told you lots of letters, MINUSTAH, MINUSTA.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
This is, I feel like the people do shit like this on purpose just to make it confusing and annoying.
I know, the letters are ridiculous. So
Yeah.
they were almost immediately getting called out by actual human rights groups, not the fake human rights groups that were Ned funded, because they were having these violent incursions into poor neighborhoods. Basically, they were going into poor neighborhoods and they were just killing people, arresting people, brutalizing people. Doctors Without Borders reported treating gunshot wounds on 20 children after one of these UN incursions into this poor neighborhood in Haiti. So they're just going in, firing indiscriminately, just basically a foreign occupying power in their country.
Yeah.
And locals were reporting all sorts of atrocities. People were reporting sexual violence. They were reporting murder. People were even like, yeah, the UN came here and stole my pigs. Like, what the fuck is that about?
What the fuck does the UN want with some pigs?
Well, that's the thing. It's probably just to be like, no, you don't get anything.
Yeah, I mean, presumably the pigs died shortly thereafter because they. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So in 2005, 9 demonstrators, April 27th, were killed during a peaceful march against MINUSTA and this weird fake transitional government. They were pro-Lavalas supporters and they were like, we want our government that we elected back. And this kind of was setting the tone, right? The people were like, no, this isn't okay. We are resisting. So that meant that violence and targeted killings against suspected Lavalas supporters were like on the rise. So then the government was like, the people are our enemy. We need to ramp this up. And Canada was like, don't worry, guys. We see it's a mess. We're going to oversee new, free, fair elections in Haiti, which is like the original elections were free and fair in Haiti. What? Why? Okay, whatever. So more than 300 heavily armed UN peacekeeping troops, that name is just so dystopian, they ended up carrying out a major military operation in Cité Soleil, which is a densely populated residential neighborhood. And during that, 23 civilians were killed, including several children. So the world is starting to kind of notice, but places like the United States and Canada, they're like, no, it's cool, guys. Everything's going to be fine. We've still got this under control.
Listen, that thing that's happening just south of us, like, you don't need to pay attention to that. You've got some other shit going on. Like, come on.
Don't worry.
Wait, what year is this all happening?
That was 2005. So the guy was elected in the year 2000. So this was within 5 years. So roughly the equivalent of a little over one presidential US term, you know?
Yeah.
So in 2006, Haiti then held new presidential elections, right? The Canada was like, we'll oversee them. And MINUSTA ended up running campaigns of voter discouragement in poor neighborhoods. So UN was going into poor neighborhoods being like, you don't want to vote. Why would you vote in the elections? Don't. You don't need to vote. So wild. And despite this, turnout though was super high. All these people were like, fuck you, get out of my country, right? So exit polls ended up giving Rene Preval, who was a former president and the favored candidate amongst Haiti's poor, a lead with more than 60% of the vote. The Provisional Electoral Council, though, reduced Preval's vote to just 48%.
Wait, reduced how? Wait,
so they were saying that, okay, they were saying these were just the votes. What are you talking about? Like, exit polls aren't matching. That's not our problem. But thousands of ballots that were bearing marks in favor of Preval were found by a Haitian television reporter in a dump site. And some were still smoldering from failed attempts to light them on fire. Like they weren't even subverting the vote in a smart way. So protests flood Haiti streets. And Preval, the guy who was supposed to win, he's like, there have been, gross errors occurring. There has been massive fraud here. And MNUSTA soldiers just shoot into the crowd of protesters after the election, and they kill somebody. They do kill somebody. So protesters then stormed the Hotel Montana, which was a luxury hotel where the vote tabulation was taking place under UN supervision. And once inside, they peacefully occupied the hotel, and there was some pretty good pictures of people just swimming in the hotel's heated pool.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but they were just like, get out of our country. Like, you are ruining everything, and you are doing fraud, and you are killing people. So finally, Preval ended up getting declared the winner, but a deal was brokered. So there were 85,000 blank ballots, and they agreed not to let them be counted in the final tally. So Preval gets inaugurated, and at the same time this is happening, a prison break happens. And these were all the political prisoners who had been put in prison under the dictatorship right after the coup. And they were like, we did not commit a crime. We should not be in prison. We are getting out of here. Right. So then MNUSTA, still in Haiti, ends up firing into the prisoners and killed 10 of them. So it's not like just because Preval is there and won the election, everything's back to normal. No, the UN and MNUSTA is still there killing innocent Haitians.
Yeah.
September 2nd, 2006, the British medical journal, The Lancet, released the results of the survey of human rights abuses in Haiti's capital during the 22 months following the 2004 coup. And what they found is there were 35,000 rapes and 8,000 murders.
And this is by MNUSTA.
Well, the vast majority of these were politically motivated murders, 4,000 in total, and they were attributed to forces that were at least allies of the interim government.
Okay.
So, not necessarily, but a significant number of physical threats and threats of sexual violence were, yes, attributed to MNUSTA soldiers. So in 2007, a Brussels-based NGO called International Crisis Group issued a report about Haiti and what was going on there. And they were like, hey, Haiti has these really overcrowded, understaffed, and like bad prisons. Like, their prisons are like a human rights issue. They're not getting enough food to eat. There's high rates of disease. And they were like, there are 2,500 people in the national penitentiary. That's 8 times its capacity. So the country's prison population rose, this is why, from 3,500 in the year 2003 to 5,500 in just 2007. So they were rapidly increasing the prison population because they were just arresting anybody who didn't agree with the right wing.
Yeah, so this is when the guy was like, I just see poor people showing up to prison every day.
Right.
That's who
that was a little bit before this, but yes, it was still continuing. So they were still ramping this up. It almost doubled in 4 years, the prison population. Basically, the rate of pretrial detention went from 80% to 89% during the same period too. So there was like there was a 9 percentage point increase in the number of people who were just like held without even having a trial. And yeah, investigators were like, the majority of these people are political prisoners. They're being held here for political reasons. There were Lavalas party members, journalists, elected politicians, and community organizers, many of whom had been imprisoned after 2004 on totally unsubstantiated charges. And the jails, it's worth noting, were all foreign built.
Oh, of course they were.
Of course they were. So Renee Preval was like, oh God, okay, now we got to figure out the prison thing, right? There's like no records. Everything's a mess, like doesn't know what's going on. By 2008, according to the World Bank, there were over 10,000 NGOs working in Haiti. So
that seems like too much.
Yeah, so there was money flowing everywhere. Some people maybe had good intentions. Many of these people were unscrupulous and trying to advance their own economic agendas. Haiti just became like grabby hands for Western powers to come in and take what they could get, much like in the days of colonization, which is heartbreaking because Haiti has such a beautiful history of resistance. So they ended up being the country with the highest per capita concentration of NGOs working there in the world. And this
I feel like I have to imagine that like the on the ground people, right? Because like I went to a liberal arts school. I knew a lot of people who were like, you know what I'm doing after college? I'm going on some aid organization trip where it's like Like it's like a lot of like earnest young people who don't know what they're fucking doing.
Yeah,
I have to imagine that you get a lot of those types.
totally. But the end result of this is that like Haiti was largely foreign funded, and these private organizations would end up representing foreign power, would end up having budgets that were sometimes higher than the Haitian government's budget.
Yeah, so it becomes sort of like by another means a privatized state because all of the funding for every damn thing is coming through these like foreign private groups.
Exactly. So today, NED still funds many groups in Haiti. There's still the RNDDH still operating there to this day. There's something called Defensors Plus. There's something called the Initiative of the Civil Society. There's a group that's known as OCAPH, again, letters. There's Crossroads of Hope, who, by the way, was headed by this guy, Charles Claremont, who was a millionaire venture capitalist. There are several media organizations like the Ayibo Post or Jury Media. Jury Media, the executive director, Abdinal Dudao, is a fellow at NED.
Okay, so first of all, what was it? Abner Claremont? What was that guy's name?
Abdinal Dudao.
Oh, before that, the Claremont,
Oh, Charles Claremont.
Charles Claremont. I'm just gonna go ahead and say I think we found the one rich guy.
This one rich guy. No, I think he's got insidious desires.
He knows. He knows what's up.
What he's up to. This guy knows. But yeah, no. So like a fellow at NED fully has the executive director, is also the executive director of a media organization in Haiti. Yeah. And he's also the co-founder of the Citizen Observatory for the Institutionalization of Democracy, or OCID, which is also funded by NED. So in 2022, July, NED hosted a conference regarding Haiti. And there's this guy who's a senior advisor for OCAPH, Guy Serge Pompoulos, great name, unfortunately. And he introduced the organization's manifesto for an inclusive dialogue at the conference. And this is like really vague, and it didn't really have like strategies or solutions for what to do with Haiti, but it promoted two orientations for Haiti. The NED-funded Cathal L'Espoir, or AKA Crossroads of Hope, and the American Global Fragility Act, sometimes abbreviated to GFA, which came about in 2019. So Crossroads of Hope, you know, we get it. NED funded, right? Organization working on behalf of Western interests. But the American Global Fragility Act, the GFA, is interesting. So in 2019, this came about, and it emphasized building relationships with other countries to strengthen the capacity of the United States to be what it considered an effective leader of international efforts to prevent extremism. So like when you get these like word salad things that don't even make sense, like democracy, burger, French fry, you know,
I'm sorry, the democracy burger French fry sounds delicious right now. Please, I want a
start that chain. Maybe NED would fund it.
Oh, I think business proposition for any of our or NED operatives who happen to be listening.
Yeah, fund us, fund our fast food chain. I'm ready. So it also included planned security assistance, quote unquote, security assistance, right, over a period of 10 years. So that's military. That's basically a paramilitary group supporting you. And the GFA was identified as what they called during this conference a vital tool for preventing, quote, adversaries such as China and Russia to expand their influence. So it's the CIA tale all this time. They just want to fight the communists. They want to fight the communists. That's what the CIA was trained to do. The CIA created NED. NED is little baby CIA. So of course, they're like, yeah, we got to fight the communists. Russia's not even communist anymore, and they're still fighting Russia, right?
I love it. Because it's not like the communism thing is like a convenient way of being like, we need to spend a tremendous amount of money on military equipment and exert like US economic power, but we need like an ideological reason to do it because we don't live in the kind of era where you can just be like, we're going to be some real assholes and like a bunch of countries with like people of color, and that's going to be cool. Like you have to be like, no. We're helping.
Well, and because China and Russia are evil.
Yeah.
And that's you see all these proxy wars the United States gets into, that it's really the United States versus Russia, or the United States versus, you know, China, but like it's not actually those things, because that's kind of not how we move anymore. It's fallen out of fashion to make it that direct. But again, you know, basically the thing is like, we don't want China and Russia to do anything we don't like, because say what you will about Russia. Russia is, again, not communist anymore, right? But China and Russia both are like at the forefront of advocating against Western imperialism.
I mean, it's also like there's like a like specific thing of like Russia having a lot of resources that they sell, like especially a lot of like energy resources that they sell to places in the EU, like Germany, where it's like, you know, there is a contest of real economic power, even though Russia's economy is minuscule compared to the United States.
Right.
But even just the fact that they like aren't sidling up to the table of American influence at every step.
Yeah,
It's,
that is, I think, mainly why Russia is, even though the USSR fell in the early 90s and we don't have communism in Russia anymore, I think that's why the United States still identifies Russia as an adversary. Because, like you said, they don't sidle up to the table of like Western influence. They're not sucking up to the United States. And they're saying things about American policies around the globe, which, you know, which are true, regardless of how you feel about Russia. Their critiques of Western imperialism are accurate and they are vocal about it.
yeah.
So Haiti ends up being the first partner under this Global Fragility Act. You know, critics are like, the GFA, it only exists to basically keep Chinese investment out of other countries. And it also blocks historical allies for Haiti, like Venezuela and Cuba, from offering them aid or support. Because it's like, no, you have to get all your money and help from us. And you can't have any of these commie countries or these countries critiquing Western imperialism help you. So this effort, this like conference where they're talking about all of this and they're, you know, bringing Haiti in under the Global Fragility Act, this conference ended up in the end bringing together a Haitian millionaire venture capitalist, two representatives of a NED-funded Haitian human rights, quote unquote, human rights organization that promoted U.S. intervention in the region, the ex-deputy special representative of the UN Secretary General for MINUSTA, right? The UN-led group that Haitians were like, they abused and victimized and harmed and killed us. A director at NED who organized the funding with US tax dollars of opposition groups who executed the coup d'etat against Aristide. And all of this meeting, this agreement effectively established Haiti as like a neo-colony of the United States.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then we have these Haitian-led, quote unquote, civil groups or quote unquote human rights organizations, but they were funded and actually at times even led overtly by the United States. And it has not been going great since this happened.
Yeah, I seem to recall something about like an assassination a few years ago.
Well, yeah, I mean, this was in 2022 that this all happened. Yeah. Since then, it's like most of the country is controlled by private gangs. 80% of the capital is thought to be gang controlled. The economy has had both zero growth, but also massive inflation, over 15% for 3 years straight. Children are experiencing like these rapid increases in hunger.
Forgive me, Madeline. You say gangs. I say corporations in the making. This is private enterprise at its best.
The kids aren't eating, but the corporations are.
Yes, that's
really what the United States cares about.
Yeah.
So October comes around, just a few months after this conference in 2022, and Ariel Henry ends up requesting military assistance from the United States, the UN, and core group governments to suppress citizen revolts against his unelected government. So Haiti, though, they're badasses. They're like, fuck you, we're not giving up. And they are still, as of 2022, they were still fighting against this foreign power, foreign-backed puppet government there. So there's this one report from Responsible Statecraft, and they said Haiti's last elections were in 2016, and Parliament has not held votes since 2019. There's been no president since July 2021, when then President Jovenel Moise, who had stayed in office 5 months past the end of his term, was assassinated. That's what you were talking about. Haiti is led by a de facto prime minister, Ariel Henry, who was chosen not by Haitians, but by the core group, which is another little special interest group, right? A group of mostly majority white countries led by the United States. Henry's reign is unconstitutional and faces widespread Haitian opposition. But with the United States propping him up, Henry has been able to serve a longer term than any prime minister in the last 40 years. So it's worth noting that the Trump administration also backed Moise despite revelations of widespread corruption, government-linked massacres, the expiration of Haiti's parliament with just like no election to get new parliament members in. In just one incident alone, the 2018 La Saline massacre, government-allied gangs killed at least 70 people, proven, documented, real, to retaliate against anti-government organizing in the neighborhood. And then that was under Trump. Trump was like, yeah, we love it. We love this guy. We're going to keep him money. Biden, not doing much better as an administration. They extended Moise's leadership until 2022, which is inconsistent with electoral law in the region.
So this is like the still unconstitutional shit. It's the same.
Still happening. So the National Endowment for Democracy in Haiti basically succeeded in taking a democratic country and making it a dictatorship without leadership that is now completely reliant on US funding, and the US is allowed to basically do whatever it wants there.
I mean, like, the funny thing about this is they did it without declaring war, but this is right. Like in the same time period, almost exactly, we did the same thing in a bunch of other countries while declaring war. And it's just sort of like, it feels like they were like, you know what, just add Haiti to the menu.
This is what's happening everywhere. This is really what the American government is up to in all sorts of countries all over the place. And I have another example of where Ned was involved in a really similar time period. Like we're talking like, you know, our lifetimes, definitely going into the 2000s. And another place, though, that lots of people probably have heard about this, the effects of this on the news, but not really understood the core causes, is Ukraine.
Yeah. Okay, so this is the one where you're going to get in trouble with the internet and it's going to be a whole damn thing.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Ukraine. We're going to talk about China. We're talking about it all. This is our controversial episode.
Is this, I feel like.
It's not controversial to people who actually know what's been going on, but it's hard because, you know, you have these massive online campaigns to back US allies, and good, well-intentioned people don't even realize what they're doing when they back these places. They're like, oh my God, like I care about people dying. And you're like, okay, well, if you care about people dying, like you need to go back a few more years than what's just happening right now. Like the sensationalized events that make the news seldom tell the whole backstory and the whole history of what got us to that point.
So this is my dumb guy take, or my dumb guy understanding of you. Are we going into Ukraine? Is that
we're about to transition into Ukraine. Yeah.
Okay, so why don't we, so the thing about, let's sum up Haiti. It seems like, right, Haiti's economy can't have been, like, that's not a threat in terms of, like, material, like, right, it's a very small country that has been very poor for its entire history, and mostly due to, like, the history of colonialism and slavery. There's a great book, by the way, Black Jacobins about the Haitian Revolution. Highly recommend. C.L.R. James, genius figure. Right. So it's not because it's like, oh shit, we're going to lose out on like a significant part of like the world economy, right? It's like a few clothing manufacturers had to find another place to make t-shirts.
Yeah, and we see this, the historical precedents for this, like when you look at like what fruit companies have managed
to do, like right, where it's like, okay guys, it's not a big deal, like just do, like you don't gotta, like you don't, this is not going to impact the US economy in a significant way.
No, and these Haiti is largely irrelevant to most Americans' lives.
Yeah,
the ways in which it's relevant. I'm sorry, it is relevant just because the story of their rebellion has been so inspiring. Like Haiti is relevant to us in that capacity, but whether Haiti has a democratically elected leader or not is not going to impact the majority of Americans in their day-to-day, but it does affect like 12 rich guys a lot in the United States. And that's why you're pumping millions and millions of dollars and trying to promote a pro-Western agenda there just to literally help a few rich dudes.
And that seems, I mean, right, it helps in two senses, I have to imagine, right? Because like the NGOs pump a ton of money into like a few rich dudes' pockets also, right? Like it is like the exercise of power is its own reward in a sense. right?
Yeah.
Like it generates money for a bunch of people to have like these weird exercises of power that like topple a democracy. That which is like, I think one of the things that you see with like Ukraine, which we're about to get into, which is like a lot of like arms manufacturers really fucking love this goddamn war.
Yes.
Right. Like, and it's like, it's good for them.
Well, and this is topical because just 2 days ago, Congress approved, I believe, $95 billion in aid to go to Israel and Ukraine. And when you look at that and the
Yeah.
context of what that means in the United States, you're like, it costs $45 billion a year to end homelessness and hunger in the US. And we're spending over twice that on something that the average American didn't get to vote on, didn't get a say on, to send to other countries to, for one, to fight a proxy war against Russia. And on the other hand, to literally fund colonization and genocide to secure a controlling interest near the Suez Canal.
But I mean, like, right. The thing is that it does do something for the American economy because it's like a lot of those arms manufacturers are US companies,
Yes.
right? This is the like, so remember, like, this was a thing where Trump like kept bragging and like Biden, no better, whatever, like they're all the same, but Trump famously bragged about like how much weapons Saudi Arabia bought and like annoying liberals got all up in arms as though it was different.
Right.
Like, where it's like, no, it's actually like in that sense good to do all of these conflicts and wars and shit.
It's financially profitable for American businesses if the American government is constantly funding overt and covert wars around the globe.
Yeah, it's the engine of the US economy in a lot.
It's like that fear song, let's have a war.
So you can go die.
Yeah. All right, so we're getting into Ukraine. So we're going to start in 1989. As early as 1989, Ned was funding a Ukrainian independence movement known as, I believe it's pronounced Rukh, R-U-K-H. So in 1991, the USSR collapsed, and Ned, though, did not stop intervening despite the fact that Ukraine was no longer part of the USSR. There was no USSR. So Ned continued to maintain a strong presence there. And at the end of 2004, during the Orange Revolution in Ukraine, the United States offered $65 million to Ukrainian opposition through NED, along with some other organizations. So in 2013, massive anti-government demonstrations broke out in Ukraine, and NED by this point was funding as many as 65 other NGOs in the country, and even provided large funds to pay wages to the protesters. So this started in 1989, back when the USSR still existed, but their presence in Ukraine has just become increasingly more cemented in the day-to-day governmental operations there since that point.
Do you remember when it like there was a like, I think it was probably like George Floyd protest era when it was like, oh, these are paid protesters?
Yeah. No, but they actually are paid protesters, but usually they're being funded by the US government, not people against the US. Like, who's paying to protest against the US government?
Listen,
maybe China. Run us our money, China. Let's go.
Yeah, come on. I will take that money.
I will take that money. But no, it's like, well, no, we're showing up at these protests because we're legitimately horrified. But Ned by 2013 is just paying people to sow political discontent in Ukraine. So 2004 to 2022 was really like an era in Ukraine where a lot was happening. Okay, so Ned by this point has had 30 years in the country, just helping to establish, after the fall of the USSR, especially what American corporate interests thought would be the best direction for Ukraine to go to. So Ned President Karl Gershman at this point was calling Ukraine the biggest prize in Europe. That's how it was worded. And in 2019, a NED annual report identified Ukraine as its top priority due to what it called its size and importance for the Europe region. So NED ended up approving 334 separate grants to Ukraine specifically to fight against Russian influence in the region. And NED embarked on a multi-year mission to control the fate of Ukraine by trying to control the political sphere and increase the role of private capital, especially private Western US capital there. So NED ended up spending like $22.4 million on operations inside of Ukraine. And remember, this is US government money, like taxpayer money. We don't get to vote on where it goes. And they also spent, like the United States in total spent $75 million there, and Ned was $22.4 million alone. So like a third of all the US money being spent in Ukraine during this period of 2014 to 2022 came just from Ned. And this includes funding of something called the Maidan Revolution. Do you know about this?
No, I don't want to get it wrong.
Okay, don't get ahead.
I vaguely remember this as something of a color revolution.
It is a color revolution, yes, which we talked about in our last episode. So basically, the democratically elected president, Viktor Yanukovych, was overthrown and replaced by a successor that was handpicked by the United States. And Ned invested 14 million US dollars in a project in Ukraine, which led to the large protest in 2014 that ended up overthrowing the government. Money was spent propping up and training pro-Western political parties, literally like finding political parties that were like, we should be more like Europe and the United States, and just throwing money at them, funding propaganda media organizations to publish fake stories, to amplify fake agendas, and subsidizing massive privatization drives that would benefit, yes, of course, foreign multinational corporations. So they're like, what can we do in this country? We're going to create fake political parties or take small political parties that already exist and just throw money at them to make them huge, full of people who are like, I think Ukraine would be so much better if it was as Western as possible. I think we should just do whatever the Americans want, and that would be awesome for us. Let's just become a puppet of the US government. And then the United States was like, we're going to give you so much money. We like what you're doing. Then they would fund propaganda, right? Like news stories coming out, like social media propaganda talking about how awesome it would be if Ukraine was doing everything it could to be just like the United States. And then they would be like, oh my God, you know what they do in the United States? Private businesses run everything. That's so the opposite of the USSR and Russia, which you just got out of. Why don't you let our private corporations in there to control everything in Ukraine? Also, because you guys are so stoked on trying to be American now because of all the work we did with those political parties and that propaganda.
This is one of the, because like, right, the fall of the Soviet Union led to like runaway inflation. Like the economy basically fucking collapsed, and it was horrible for
well, the fall of the Soviet Union led to the largest drop in life expectancy ever reported in world history. It led to so much carnage around the globe. Like it, this isn't even getting to places like Croatia, things that happened there, because you basically had a power grab in a lot of the smaller countries and massive civil wars broke out. You had a lack of access to resources that had been previously assured by the government. You had an increase in alcoholism, a decrease in access to healthcare, an increase in homelessness, massive unemployment. People were out selling their stuff from their houses on the streets. And the American media was like, look at them, little baby capitalists. We're so proud. And everybody was dying at these very, very young ages again. Because remember, at its peak, the USSR had got the life expectancy up to meet Americans. At one point they were above us, like in the 1950s or 60s, maybe the 70s even. But yeah, so you saw this, like it took the collapse of the USSR basically created this clusterfuck shit show in the region, and all of these countries were hit hard, by internal conflict and fighting, but also by other Western powers mostly, but other powers around the world being like, how can I get my hands in there and exploit this for my own gain now?
Well, no, I guess all of that, and it's just like, oh, it became like an economic grab for all of these countries. Like the famous, like they want the McDonald's and the blue jeans thing became like a Faustian bargain kind of thing, where it's like, well, you got the blue jeans, and now your economy's in shambles because like you've gone from like a planned economy to just like massive privatization, which means a few corrupt assholes.
Right, exactly. So that's what the United States was up to in Ukraine. And that's why when the USSR collapsed, they didn't leave. They weren't like, mission accomplished, bye-bye communism, haha. They were like, oh shit, now we can make some real money.
But that's like the thing that like I have to imagine, first of all, if it's 2014 and you're living in the Ukraine, start a political party, because like chances are you might get some net funding.
Just right? Like our Freedom Eagle Burger is really going to take off.
I think this is Freedom Eagle Burgers. Is that what we're called? I thought it was Freedom Burger Fries, but
oh shit. Yeah. Freedom Burger Fries is good. Freedom Eagle Burger is good too, because it can be abbreviated to FEB.
That's what, you know what? Ned and Fed. That seems like a match made in heaven.
Yeah, because Freedom Eagle Fries is Fef and it's not as catchy.
Yeah, but all I'm saying, you're the brand person. You know
Yeah, I
how to
really do this for a living. I can speak to the people where they are. Yeah, but no, this is a way to make a lot of money. And that's like what we saw in Cuba, where the rappers were like,
oh shit,
oh, I can make a ton of money from the US government if I just do what they say.
I like you're a mediocre rapper. Start saying that you're pro-democracy. And
Start saying you love the United States. Right.
yeah, you are like mediocre person in Ukraine. Suddenly you're like pro West.
Pro privatization, pro the United States. So Yanukovych was seen as a threat to Western interests, right? Because he had been playing too nice with Russia. That's like what led to all of this. He was like, look, I want to be diplomatic, I'm going to like, we're looking out for Ukraine first. I'm not trying to make enemies with Russia. That would be bad for us. But the United States was like, no, you need to make enemies with Russia. What the fuck are you doing? Like, this is bad for us if you try to normalize relationships with Russia. So the United States, that's why we immediately started supporting nationwide protest movements against him. So this guy, Jeremy Kuzmarov, explained this and said, Ned activists employed a broad public relations strategy that included A, busing paid out-of-town protesters into Kiev, which is literally what like they were trying to say that leftists were doing in the United States. And when they were saying that, I was like, who would do that? That doesn't make sense. And I'm like, oh, they're saying that's because that's what they do. That's what they do.
Okay, this is all in the 50s and 60s. Like there was a right-wing organization called the John Birch Society. I think they're still like around, but they don't have any power. The guy who founded it was like, you know what we should act like? And then he came up with like the most deranged idea of what he thought communists acted like, and created accidentally an extraordinarily like influential grassroots organization. And it's one of those things where you're like the right, anytime they're like the left is doing something, which if the left ever had the organizational capacity to act that, like it would be sick, like it would be fun.
Right.
Busing protesters, I'm sorry, you're gonna a car's gonna take me to the sick.
Yeah, let's go. Yeah.
Like
no, so but this is something that Ned was caught doing in Ukraine. Yeah. You see why right wingers are like, this is a talking point, because you're like, well, this is what a right wing American political agenda has done in other countries, definitely. So he continued, that was point A, busing paid out-of-towner protesters into Kiev. B, creating an online TV protest station and agitation paraphernalia, created a whole TV station to spread propaganda. And C, providing offshore training to the Yanukovych student leadership, like college kids basically, who were like, I don't like the president. They would literally take them and move them offshore to get training somewhere else. From like
they're doing like a
human trafficking college.
Oh no, it sounds like they're doing like School of America stuff, but for like Kiev college kids.
Yeah, that's a better way to think of it. Yeah. And so he said the strategy was based on the writings of Gene Sharp and a template that the Ned had successfully employed in Serbia with a youth group called Otpor, which helped secure the defeat of socialist Slobodan Milosevic in September 2000 elections, which Milosevic
is not great.
Yeah. Not great. We're not. I'm not gonna
like this is like I think like when you think like that, this is why I was saying the thing about like listen, it doesn't have to necessarily be like a totally cool democratic thing. It's just like America gets in there, they don't make it better. Whatever's going on.
Yeah. No, we're making it worse. We're making it all worse.
Yeah.
So John McCain and then Assistant Secretary of State Victoria Nuland flew to Kiev while all of this was happening and handed out cookies to the protesters.
They literally
PR op. They were like, cookie, oh, look, you guys, student protesters. Yeah, you stand up to your government, who's just trying to make sure that they're diplomatic with neighboring countries.
I feel like this had to have been at the point at which like McCain was beginning to falter a little, because like that is the most, can you imagine like you're getting paid by this like random NGO where you're like, it's dubious where this money's coming from because you're just a kid in Kiev, you're like 19.
Right.
Like, and this like random like old guy just like walks up to you and is like, here's some cookies.
Yeah.
Like what? Like that's like one of the most bizarre fucking.
Very, very surreal. So in 2014, in February, there was actually a call that got linked from this time period where Nuland, this is Secretary of State Victoria Nuland, and the UK ambassador to Ukraine were selecting who should be the next prime minister of Ukraine during all of this.
So do we have a transcript or recording of this?
You can find it online. A lot of people have transcribed it and recorded. That could be like a good thing to link in our bonus.
Yeah.
Probably.
Oh, yeah.
So Newland landed on Yatsenyuk, who then became, yes, the prime minister just a few weeks later. So within a couple of weeks of that phone call, meanwhile, snipers had massacred almost 100 protesters, and the U.S. publicly blamed Yanukovych, however, again, there's different ways I've heard people pronounce this. The EU, though, was like, oh, are you sure? Like our buddies, like our bros, the EU, they were like, United States, we don't actually think that it was his guys. And a leaked audio call between the EU's foreign affairs chief and the Estonian foreign minister revealed that they actually thought the United States had staged a false flag attack as pretext to remove Yanukovych and stage the coup.
That seems, I don't have a lot of good things to say about the European Union. This seemed like good on them for once.
But they were private about it. They basically, the EU's foreign affairs chief was on the phone with the Estonian foreign minister, and they were like, "You guys' intelligence saw that this was the United States, right?" And then Estonia was like, "Yeah, for sure, this was the United States doing a false flag." And they're like, "All right, just so we're all on the same page."
Oh, okay. So they weren't putting out statements. They were just like calling each other up and being like, "Yo, buddy,
this has USA all over it. Am I right?" And then
do you think that like they were like, dude, why didn't they deal us in? What the fuck? Why are we getting left out of the coups?
That was probably their concern, honestly. Yeah. So the post 2014 revolutionary government began instituting, of course, our guy, our bitch, the Milton Friedman American School of Economic Theory almost immediately. So this is something else we see. The United States gets involved and stages a coup, overthrows somebody, and what happens next? All of a sudden, you got the pro-US guy there, the pro-capital guy, and we're doing Milton Friedman economics, which we know does not work.
Which, like, you gotta imagine, like, we're in 2014. This is when we are. Okay, yeah. So
10 years ago.
It's like, right, this has been tried a ton.
Like 50 years of trying this.
Can you imagine, right, like you're some like little like, like neoclassical Keynesian type guy who's at like some university in Kiev or whatever, and some assholes just like, hey guys, so like just late to the party, but you know what we're all gonna do? Milton fucking Friedman. Can you imagine how annoying that must be?
Oh, so annoying, but it still happens to this day. Like if you get like an IMF or World Bank loan, they make you do Milton Friedman style economics and as like a contingency or like a criteria for getting your money. And you're just like, what? We know this does not work, but this is what's happening, of course. So Ukraine then starts selling off any state-owned assets it has, and it starts kind of using private corporations for all of that junk instead. So the main goal of NED's funding in Ukraine, by 2014, they've been there since 1989, right? We're looking at 25 years of influence in Ukraine with goals, with stated goals. So their goals were pushing through a mass privatization of the country's state-owned businesses and building up, yes, the political parties that would end up representing American special interests. And there is evidence for this. This isn't just like conspiracy theorists be conspiracy theorizing. No. We have evidence for this. There was nearly $3 million that went through the NED offshoot of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce for the purpose of, quote, sparking economic transformation in Ukraine. And NED describes its economic goals as, quote, free market capitalism and global trade. So we know that that's what that $3 million was doing. And of course, we see influence of them directly paying these political parties. So the journalist Alan MacLeod says, the point, of course, is to develop a cadre of pro-Western neoliberal thought leaders who will ally themselves to the United States and its vision for Ukraine. So really, Ukraine has been, if you're wondering, like, why is the United States giving Ukraine so much money? It's not like we say we're like, oh, we care so much about people, but it's like, no, we care so much about Ukraine as a political ally, like in the region it's in specifically, and as a way to make rich American business guys more money.
And like specific, like it's like a market.
It's a market. It's a
We
market.
want that fucking market.
And we don't want it to go towards Russian influence, because Russians are like, hey, the United States is destroying the planet. Am I right? Like, they're ruining everything. So
I mean, like, to be clear, Russia's not also like that. Russia's not like a bunch of like hippie puppy.
No,
right?
Russia, today's Russia is not the USSR. But again, one thing they do is they speak out against Western imperialism, and the United States doesn't want anybody talking about that.
Yeah.
So propaganda was playing a huge role in this effort, rather, also. So Ukraine Crisis Media Center, for example, directly funded by a number of different US governmental organizations like NED, as well as by NATO and the governments of Germany, Canada, the UK, Norway, Sweden, Poland, Finland, and the Netherlands. And their work is primarily focused on psychologically aligning Ukraine with Western values and interests.
You gotta feel like a real schmuck if you're like an everyday Ukrainian, like at this point, because you're like,
oh, are you kidding? We're Americans. We're the ultimate schmucks. We're the most propagandized people on the planet.
No, I mean, I'm not saying you don't gotta be feeling like a schmuck if you're American. I'm just saying, like, we're deceiving ourselves.
That's true. It's
or at least we're being deceived by our own kind, right? Yeah. Like like to have some like American asshole like come into Ukraine and be like, "Hi, my name's Ned."
Yeah. You love being exploited by our corporate oligarchy. You love it. You want nothing more than to be exploited by our corporate oligarchy. Oh, you love it so much. And then you're like, maybe I kind of love it. I don't know about it.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's rough. It's a rough position to be in. There's also this place called the Center for Civil Liberties, or CCL. They have been supported financially since 2016 by NED. And they are presented as a human rights group, but like, no, they are literally operating at the behest of NED, our second CIA. So fun fact, CCL is often used as a source in other US state-run propaganda wings like Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, or Voice of America. So that's what I think is interesting. They have developed NED and the CIA such a network of propaganda wings that they're able to corroborate each other's bullshit.
Well, this is right. Like this is I feel like at some point you probably did something on like Korea or whatever, where it's like all of the stuff you hear about, like the Democratic Republic of whatever.
The DPRK.
There we go. Thank you. Is like some bullshit that came out of like a weird Radio Free Asia thing or some like fucking tabloid that's like, oh, well, this is actually kind of bullshit. This is nonsense.
It's nonsense. No, we did a whole episode back when Kenna was the co-host all about Radio Free Asia. And it was one of my favorite episodes I've done, because it's one of those episodes where you just get hit in the face with all the propaganda you've been consuming unwittingly. And you're like, oh my God, it's right there in, like now public congressional documents. Like you like follow the trail where it's like, here's the classified CIA document where they're like, we really need to start something that does this. And then you're like, here's like a congressional hearing, like kind of transcript that's like, now we are allocating this fund to these people to do this thing. Like it's just so easy to follow exactly what's happening and the stories that come out of it, that it's honestly, when you talk about feeling like a schmuck, right? Like,
I mean, we've all been schmucks.
We're all marks. We've all been marks. There's no matter the smartest person you know has unwittingly consumed American propaganda and taken it as truth. And then years later in their life will learn the truth about it and be like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. Like I bought the propaganda line. So basically, these propaganda wings end up using each other as sources to boost their credibility. It's like the popular clique at school, just deciding someone's ugly. And then they're like, I think that person's ugly. Do you? Yeah, I think they're ugly too. And then all of a sudden that person's ugly, regardless of what they look like.
And it's, I mean, this is, what's the silly meme about the Spider-Man's point, where it's like, who's your source for this, like, for like human rights shit? Oh, it's like this, my guy Bob over there. And then you ask Bob and they're like, oh, it's my guy, like the other guy who you just talked to. It's a whole circular thing.
And they're all pointing at each other. Right.
Yeah.
So, where Yanukovych had maintained a cordial relationship with Russia, this new post-coup government obviously aggressively suppressed Russian sympathies within the country. So, like, if you were Ukrainian, you're like, well, I don't know, I don't mind Russia so much. They're like, absolutely not. That is, we don't even talk about that. So, since 2014, the government shut down Russian language media and banned the Russian language from being spoken in schools and even in some stores and restaurants. And this wasn't a big deal for the majority of Ukrainians, but for like a third of Ukrainian citizens, they spoke Russian as their first language.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say, because like this is like when you hear, there is like a part of me that like this is when I get real unpopular opinion, where it's like, well, there is like a sort of like culturally and like linguistically Russian large minority population in Ukraine,
In Ukraine.
and I'm
This
just
is totally true. So for this one third of the people, they were like, that's my main language. I just can't speak it in public. Like what? And this is especially true in a region of Ukraine known as the Donbass. So this is a large industrial area of eastern Ukraine. So it's closer to Russia. So it makes sense that, like people existed before borders existed, that culturally there's going to be some overlap there. Just like in Southern California, there's some overlap with Northern Mexico culturally, right? Because some of our friends, for example, their families woke up and learned the border had crossed them. They're like, I've been in this area. Now you're calling it the United States of America. Okay, whatever. So, areas where borders press up against each other, there's cultural bleed. That's very obviously true. So this is a large industrial area of Eastern Ukraine, and nearly 3/4 of the residents there speak Russian as their primary language. So Russian-speaking Ukrainian resistance groups have been in armed conflict with the Ukrainian government since the 2014 coup. And some people in the region are like, it's a full-on civil war. So NED, though, has its sights on the Donbas region. So they have stated goals that include expanding outreach of NED-approved media in the Donbas specifically and assisting civil groups working in the frontline territories there. They're like, we got to get in there and we got to pump propaganda into it.
one of the things that I find like I don't know, you got to speculate because this is a predominantly Russian speaking like area, right? And so they're trying to do propaganda there, and they're like, shit, man, what language do you think we should use for our like anti-Russian propaganda?
Right? Yeah. Do you use Russian? How are they going about that? That's a great question. You don't want to spread the use of Russian language, but 3/4 of people there are speaking it. But this is all making sense. So basically, you had a leader who the West thought, democratically elected leader in Ukraine, who the West thought was just not even allying, just being like neutral on Russia, just being like, we're going to be diplomatic. Russia's our neighbor. They're a huge global superpower. They're right next to us. It's not in our best interest to piss them off. We're just going to be diplomatic. And the United States is like, absolutely not. That is being way too nice. Get you out of there. We'll put in our guy instead. Then your guy gets in there, and all of a sudden your guy is like, nobody's allowed to speak Russian anymore. And then, so this is where you have these people who are like, what do you mean that's what we speak? Like, what? Like, are we not Ukrainian too? We happen to speak Russian. So this is kind of the situation that ended up happening. And in 2015, the CIA itself, Big Ned, right?
But Big Brother comes like the Big Brother, not Big Brother.
Big Brother, yeah, no. But like Ned is the little brother going to school, and then CIA shows up and is like, let me get involved in your school, like playground drama too. The CIA starts properly training insurgency leaders in Ukraine in 2015. Now, originally funds earmarked for this campaign included provisions that the funding could not go to this like infamous neo-Nazi group, which was called.
It did, didn't it?
It did, yeah, it did. So that language ended up getting removed due to pressure from the Pentagon. The Pentagon was like, we can't give the money to the neo-Nazis. They're the best guys.
I mean, like historically, we love European neo-Nazis. We've loved them for many, many decades. They are some of our favorite people to give money to, or at least if you are the United States security apparatus.
Oh yeah.
Intelligence services, you're like, you know who we love? Nazis.
Yes. So the US State Department was like, you got to get this language out of here. We're giving like all the money to the Nazis. The Nazi guys are our best fighters we've been training. And this is why you see so many pictures of Ukrainian fighters with Nazi patches and Nazi insignia everywhere, including even like the Wolf's Angel insignia worn by the Azov soldiers, right? Which was the crest of the SS brigades under Hitler. So you've seen this actually recently, that big contemporary media sources are trying to post these really inspirational stories about these Ukrainian fighters. And everybody's like, dude, all of these guys are wearing Nazi patches. Like all of these guys are Nazis in this photo. And at first it was kind of like, written off as being like a left-wing conspiracy. People were like, no, they're not all Nazis. But it happened so much that now these media outlets were like, we have to come up with stories to explain why everybody we photograph in Ukraine is a Nazi. And it's like, well, it's because the United States funded a bunch of Nazis there to fight against Russian influence. Like, we paid for the Nazis to be fighters. So what do you mean, why are all the fighters Nazis? We did that. That's what we did.
Yeah.
So this obviously is what started people speculating that the CIA was responsible for training and funding these neo-Nazi paramilitary groups in Ukraine, which, you know, we don't have the declassified documents yet, but we know that Ned Little and the CIA were both funding people there, and that the Pentagon asked them to remove the clause about how you couldn't give it to the Nazis. So there's some examples of people who even like rose to prominence as like Ukrainian fighters, and then all these media groups have to do all this backtracking because they're like, oh shit, that's a Nazi. So there's Elena Bialozerska. Do you know this person?
No, I just gotta imagine that, like, can you, like, you work for, like, what, like, US News and World Report. Famously, this is the one founded by that guy, David Lawrence, right-wing organ. But so you're like a, like, 24-year-old journalist or whatever. You just got out of journalism school. And you're like, I'm working in the column mines, writing human inspo stories about like brave Ukrainians fighting Putin's evil army or whatever. And then you're like, oh man, everyone it turns out is a Nazi.
They're
Can you
all
imagine
Nazis.
how disappointing that is? Like, you go to your like little journalism school class reunion, they're like, what did you do? I edited out a bunch of Nazi signifiers from photos on Photoshop. Like,
No, this is like there was like a real media meltdown moment, like
yeah.
maybe last year, where all of these news sources had to explain, because everybody on Twitter especially was like, why do you keep posting pictures of people with literal Nazi patches on them? And these media outlets were like, no. And then they were like, oh shit, no, like we are. And you know, it was like a whole thing. So this fighter Elena, for example, she made international news, and she was really being pitched by these news outlets as this like heroic freedom fighter in Ukraine. But she was part of a neo-Nazi paramilitary group called the Right Sector. And she even has like a blog and a YouTube channel. Like, she's very vocal about this, where she's on there talking about all of her wild, horrendous ideas. She's like, Holocaust, not real. Gay people, I think we should kill them. Berlin needs a monument to Hitler. Like, she is just like aggressively, publicly a Nazi.
This is well-trod territory or whatever, but the Holocaust denier plus Nazi thing is is deeply weird, because it's sort of
true.
like, wait,
it's true. Are you proud of your guys or not?
Like where it's like, listen, man, you want to do the Holocaust.
Right. You're
that.
a literal Nazi. No, that's so true. I never even thought about that. Their ideology is so like not even consistent with its own fuckery.
So it's like,
we're not dealing with brilliant people here. We're not dealing with brain surgeons.
I mean, no one's ideology is consistent. Like, right, this is
I guess,
but not but like it's one of those things where it's like, look, you have to dig for the inconsistencies with most people.
Right. No, this is right there on the surface.
It's just like, either like pick one, man.
Right. You want a guy build a statue to Hitler for what?
He didn't do the Holocaust.
I don't, yeah, whatever.
But
so
yeah,
this is a wild situation. So this chick with the fucking most garbage trash ass beliefs on the planet, terrible fucking human being, right? In 2009, she was invited to NATO headquarters to give a speech.
Is it okay? This
2019,
is
sorry.
I've been wondering when NATO was going to pop up, because some of the rhetoric what I understand to be the case was that there were gestures that was like, Ukraine is going to be in NATO.
Well, this is part of it. And this is why you'll see a lot of communists say like Ukraine is a proxy war, and to claim that there was no American or Western provocation into the situation, it's denying history, because basically there had been a non-aggression pact signed between the United States and Russia that was like the United States and like NATO, like the Western powers would not attempt to broker these specific deals with any countries bordering on Russia, because it would be seen as a sign of aggression against Russia. Like, when you look at like a map of the world, like the United States are like US-led powers. We've got outposts everywhere. Like, we're encircling enemy countries. Like, we are fucking everywhere. So part of this aggression pact which is, I know, we're talking about Nazis and Hitler. That's a
Yeah,
Hitler
I
term.
mean,
I'm using the
like,
wrong
right,
term.
these are always right, right?
Yeah. So
No,
this,
and like
whatever this treaty was, it was supposed to be that any country that bordered Russia, the West would not bring into its little Western alliance clubs, you know, like NATO.
we should
So
also point, okay, please forgive me for interrupting. North Atlantic Treaty Alliance, how many of these motherfucking countries are all in the North? Like, this is not,
no, there's no rhyme or reason really.
it's just, it's dumb.
Right. So the United States was like, well, maybe we'll take Ukraine in. And that violated basically this treaty we
Yeah.
had signed with Russia. So, you know, whatever. I'm not saying that Russia invading Ukraine was justified or what the correct lens to view Russia is not that like Russia is awesome. You know, Russia is not the USSR, right? The correct lens through which to view Russia is one of the few countries that is like Western imperialism is an evil that will destroy us all. And that part is true. And they're not the only country saying that, obviously, right? Like other countries have tried to say that. Hades tried to say that, got their leader overthrown. You know, Iran tried to say that, got their leader overthrown. And, you know, you look at that and you're like, this is why you hear people say, well, this wasn't exactly unprovoked, and that language is really misleading. It's like we were there for 25 years convincing Ukrainians the best thing they could be is American and Western, and then we dangled the carrot of NATO membership in front of them, and we were like, come be like us, come over here, come be like us, which violated a treaty we had signed with their next door neighbor. And then what happened when push came to shove? They can't be in NATO because it'll start World War III.
Well, I mean,
they were never going to be in NATO. You know what I mean? Like
I don't know how to say this without sounding awful. This makes me feel like Henry Kissinger at various points, in the sense that I'm like, look, Kissinger's thing was like bringing in all of these moral considerations is like kind of beside the point to like the game of like power politics internationally, right? And it feels to me at least as though like when I think about Russia, I'm like, well, this is a country that in various ways is trying to play on the international stage, which means obviously, right, they're going to either have to become like one of these weird client states of the United States, or they're going to be in conflict with the United States.
True.
There's not like a good or bad to this. Like, it's just like, well, that is kind of what it is, right? And so I don't judging Russia's morality doesn't really enter into like the goodness or badness of it. I'm just like, oh, it's just
no, but I think though there is something to be said for how we try to paint anybody with any country with a valid critique of how the United States does business. We do paint up as the most amoral, evil country on the face of the planet. And it doesn't really stand up to scrutiny, because when you look at who's dropped the nuclear weapons, who's invaded the most countries, who has military outposts all around the world, who is sending the CIA and Ned into your country to foment, you know, like subversive acts of anti-government like for 25 years and stage coups. Like, it's the United States doing this shit. Like,
oh no, that I feel perfectly like, it's like I couldn't like,
I cannot as an American judge any other country like that.
That's I think what I'm saying, where I'm just like,
unless,
look, okay.
Unless you have American backing, like Israel, unless you are like a vassal client state of the United States, that we are beholden to each other, and you are an extension of US imperial power like Israel is. Like,
or you are the
USA.
Degraded market that is being like actively exploited by the United States. That's the only way.
That's the only way you can exist in the world. Right. So that's why when you hear people say like, well, this wasn't exactly unprovoked, and this is why the United States is so heavily involved, it is a proxy war against Russia, because we violated a treaty potentially by telling Ukraine we were going to let them into NATO. So it's like this whole mess, and it's obviously not like,
it's just like that. It's like the people hurting are fundamentally like Ukrainians who don't have any like.
Right, exactly. This is the thing. It's like, if you're just like a Ukrainian in the Donbass region, you're like, why can't I speak Russian anymore? Like, what? That's my native language. And then it's like, oh, actually, because the United States was mad that this guy that you elected wasn't like outwardly aggressive enough at like dinner parties to this guy from Russia. And you're like, what the fuck does that have to do with my life? Like, what? Like, and that's the United States. We meddle, we create these global situations. And then when the global situations come to a head, we're like, oh my God, can you believe that happened? And it's like, we did it. We did that. We created that situation. And then our, US state media, which is most of our media is state media to some degree, which people don't want to believe, but it's like, you look at Operation Mockingbird, we have a history of paying and funding journalists to say whatever we want. The state media comes out with the talking points that is like, we have no idea why this happened. Can you believe this happened? Like, wow, it came out of nowhere. And it's like, no, it came out of Ned being there since 1989, specifically trying to make this happen.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, like,
goal. Like, I don't understand how you think well, how did this happen? You're surprised.
yeah.
So whatever. So NATO in 2019 invites a Nazi to give a speech because they're like, yay, Ukraine, we love you so much. Invites a Nazi. And they were the only ones like,
Which is not off-brand for them.
no, it really isn't, unfortunately. Canada also invited a Nazi, and there were like all these people like giving this Nazi like standing, like this guy was like straight up like in the SS. Like they were like,
Yeah.
yes, not, and then all these news organizations had to be like, you guys literally gave like a standing ovation to a Nazi. And they were like, oh my God, pretend we didn't do that. Like, we are literally in this position where we're propping up the most evil, terrible people on the planet to do our bidding. And it's just all in all ridiculous. It's a very, very disgusting, evil thing. So basically what we had in Ukraine, the situation is that we had far-right paramilitary Nazi groups trained by the CIA, probably from everything we can tell, although the formal documents haven't been declassified yet, but it makes sense, funded by Ned, baby CIA. And these are the ones who, yes, helped forcefully overthrow Yanukovych, depending on your pronunciation, from office in Ukraine, and we're backing the new at the time, right, pro right-wing dictator that was not dictator, the pro right-wing leader.
Wait, have we gotten to the comedian yet?
No, I stopped short of the comedian.
Okay.
The episodes are long already.
Yeah.
But yeah, interestingly enough, the most current thing I did include, because I thought this was relevant, is the thing about Ned, remember, is they're like, everything we do in public. We have no shame. You can look up anything we did on our website. We'll tell you exactly who we gave money to, for what, and when. Well, in March of 2022, Ned silently deleted all public records from their website of any funding efforts in Ukraine.
Is there a way back on this, or are they just gone?
You can probably do the Wayback Machine on it, I bet. If you go to
Okay.
Wayback Machine, I would love to know if you're able to find like compare the before and the after. I have seen some people compare the before and the after, but that's because they were like doing research on this in February, and then they went back in March to like check their notes, and they're like, oh, it's gone, but I have all these screenshots. I have all these PDFs I downloaded. Like, what?
Yeah.
Very interesting. So those would be the biggest ones we talk about until we get to China. I do have a few other ones that are going to be like little fast, interesting things that happened kind of in the chronology of Ned. So I wanted to include them. Like January of 2011, large scale anti-government demonstrations broke out in Egypt. And on February 11th of 2011, the Egyptian president Mubarak resigned. Well, according to US diplomatic cables and other materials obtained by WikiLeaks, Ned played an important role in organizing and manipulating anti-government demonstrations in Egypt to make that happen. And through NGOs like the National Association for Change and the April 6th Youth Movement, Ned provided funding, training, and other support to these demonstrations to try to overthrow the government there. And the name and slogan of the National Association for Change, fun fact, are identical to the same anti-government organizations in other countries that have received money from Ned.
So they didn't even change the stationery, is what
They
you're
didn't
saying.
even, they were just like, we're doing it's the same. It's the same thing. It's like Radio Free Europe versus Radio Free Asia.
I feel like Ned's next goal, they gotta start training. One of my least favorite words in the current English lexicon, creative, as like a noun.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I thought like they gotta start training creatives in these countries, because the branding copy and pasting it, right? Like they're
getting lazy.
Get a graphic designer in there.
Get some poets. It's always, they don't have the poets. There's also some stuff in Korea, like on June 13th of 2018, Ned presented its 2018 Democracy Award to a collection of Korean activists whose goal was to try to overthrow the North Korean government.
Mm-hmm.
So,
they've been doing that for.
I know, but Ned was like, we love what you're up to. We're going to fund this whole overthrow the North Korean government thing.
That feels like it's like, hey guys, can I sit at the table? And I was like, oh yeah, I guess you've like.
I mean, but it's not to say there's not a unification movement in Korea. We did a whole episode about Korea. people in North Korea and South Korea both want a unified Korea. The reason we don't have a unified Korea is, again, why? The United States.
Yeah, no, I guess I'm just like Ned's involvement feels like they were like, hey, can we get in on this action?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of feels like the
It's funny though, because it's like, well, we divided it and now we're funding trying to get it back together, but only
yeah.
in the way we want.
Well, that's obvious. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, the thing about the dividing thing is like our policy really has been throughout like the 50s and 60s, like divide and conquer. Like if you can't take the whole thing, let's divide it up and let's conquer part of it. And at least that's some progress. And that's what we tried to do in Vietnam. Obviously did not work. That's what we did in Korea. And so many people think that the reason why the United States was involved in Korea happened with the Korean War. Absolutely not. We were there committing massacres of people
Yeah.
and doing a harsh like military dictatorship in what now we would call South Korea. We were doing that way before the Korean War. Like we're the reason North Korea exists. And that's something lots of people don't know. So very interesting. Now we're like funding this unification effort. But really it's because we did divide and conquer. The United States effectively conquered South Korea and had like a pro-US puppet government there for many, many years. And now we're trying to apparently conquer North Korea as well. And Ned has stated that their goal is to transition North Korea into a free market economy. And they have a track record of contributing funds to South Korea to oppose the DPRK as early as 1986. So like our whole life, Ned has been giving South Korea money to try to get them to overthrow North Korea, basically.
No, I guess to me, I'm just sort of like, well, if I understand correctly, in the post, like in the can't really say post-war because technically there's like a treaty. It's not like the end of the war kind of thing. Um, but like in the period after like the big conflict, South Korea was like not doing great, and there was like sweatshops and like pretty bad in a military dictatorship for like decades. And
Yes,
it's
being
only
treated
been
horrifically by the United States,
yeah.
heavily exploited by the United States. Very, very bad.
And so like so my like right, like I have to imagine if you're like North Korean, you're like, well, we're isolated as fuck. This is not great, like in the world economy.
Right.
However, this Milton Friedman guy seems like a real fucking asshole.
Yeah.
Like maybe we're not doing that. Maybe we
Right.
want reunification on our terms.
Well, that's the thing. It's like when you think about everything the United States did to Korea up until the Korean War, before the Korean War, when you think about the history
Yeah.
of the United States in Korea, you get it. You get why North Korea, after Korea was divided in half by the United States, why they were like, we don't want anything to do with this. You guys are fucking up everything. You get why. I mean, I would probably try to be as isolationist as possible too, honestly.
Yeah, I do, but I think it's on blowbacks. They have like a moment where they're talking about like Swedish like observers, because the DPRK did have like trade relationships with some countries. Sweden, and apparently they had like a huge Volvo contract at various points. But there's a point where the Swedish observers come in and they're like, "This is pretty great, but you guys are like going a little hard on the like, cool dictator shit or like cool president shit."
Yeah.
Like in a way, it's like it's not our sensibility, but apparently they were doing much better than South Korea at the time, and
Yeah.
so it's only been like economic warfare on the part of the United States that has created.
Yeah. No, that is
Yeah.
something interesting too. Yeah, for a while the DPRK was doing way better than South Korea and had more of the population, like
Yeah.
really at this higher point. That's true. Okay, so this gets us to China, which is the next big section of what we're talking about. And part of talking about China is also going to be talking about Hong Kong.
Mhm.
I didn't do anything about Tibet because I really think we need to do a whole episode about Tibet and the Free Tibet movement.
Yeah, I have like it's got to be from like the early 80s. It's like a Beastie Boys shirt, like Free Tibet shirt that
Yes.
where it's like I might not really free. I don't know how to no, I think.
Yeah. We gotta do a whole episode on Tibet. So we didn't talk about
Yeah.
Tibet, but we're gonna talk about China. We're gonna talk about Hong Kong. So 1996 in China. That year, Ned spent $1.6 million for political programs in China. They also spent millions more dollars on Chinese language broadcasts by, yes, our favorites, our fan favorite CIA propaganda wings, Voice of America, and Radio Free Asia. So they helped with these propaganda things. So if you've listened to our episode on Radio Free Asia, I think it's called Radio Free whatever. It's one of my favorite episodes. I definitely recommend you listen to it. This ties in with what Ned has been doing and supporting the CIA in places like China. So Ned is also responsible for spreading these really sensational stories, that you've probably heard of. Anytime I log online, people are talking about the Uyghurs or the
Oh,
Uyghurs.
the
I
Uyghurs.
pronounce
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
I also have a Uyghur hat that was given to me by an old Russian professor
Yeah.
somewhere. Yeah.
So the main group that's responsible for talking about this is called the World Uyghur Congress, and they are funded almost entirely by Ned.
Mhm.
So in 2013, Ned actually requested additional funding specifically for increased work in the Xinjiang region, where all of these stories started coming out of. So we can see that this was something they were directly funding. And Omar Kanat, who's the chairman of that group, told one reporter that Chinese authorities were putting more than 1 million Uyghurs in re-education camps, which was up to 1/10 of the Muslim population of Xinjiang at the time. And Kanat's previous job, it's worth noting, was at the CIA propaganda network called Radio Free Asia.
Wait, Maddie, do you want to back up and explain who the Uyghurs are for a second?
The Uyghurs are, we're going to get into it a little bit, but they were the Muslim ethnic minority in China. And a thing about China is that because they're Marxist-Leninists, there is the right to self-determination for people who are marginalized. And we're going to see this play in with a lot of things. So there is a lot of regional management, especially of places where there are ethnic minorities. Now, one of the things people point to is that there was some like militant religious extremism popping up here and there, kind of like what we see happening like in Europe, for example, when you think about like ISIS or things like that. So it is true that China did do education attempts to try to de-radicalize religious extremists. Not like in an Islamophobia way, not like in like, oh, the Muslim people are
They're just like, hey, it seems like there's a
just like there are right-wing Christian religious extremists here in the United States, right? There did appear to be a few incidents of some religious extremism within the Muslim community in that area of Xinjiang. But again, not because they're Muslim, because extremism can pop up in every single form. And again, like the KKK, here in the United States, Christian.
They had a form of like anti-government, right?
Pro-religion extremist. Yeah. So there were some like education attempts. They were basically like, okay, we're going to work on this through education. We're going to set up these educational facilities. That is a real thing that happened. And China will tell you they did that. They're like, yes, we did this. Here's all the planning for it. Here's all the documentation. This is why we were doing it, which is probably, I'm going to say, better than France being like, it's illegal to wear a burqa and we're going to make women strip down naked at gunpoint on beaches in France now because of religious fanaticism. Like that's what France was doing. So for reference, this was around the same time period, and China was like, we're going to do these.
Oh, it's the Bertini debates and all of that. Like, or the what was that fucking dumbass newspaper that did all the Charlie Hebdo bullshit? Yeah,
exactly. So this was this era when this was something that was popping up a lot. People were talking about this. Different countries were like, what about this? This is what China did. So around the same time. But this guy, Omar Kanat, the head of the World Uyghur Congress, he used to work at Radio Free Asia, which is, again, a United States CIA propaganda wing. They are the source for nearly every single Uyghur story you will ever see online.
Okay.
It goes back to Radio Free Asia. When asked how he arrived at 1 million people, Kanat said he actually didn't know, and he was, quote, relying on Western media estimates to make his claim of 1 million. So this goes back to the thing we were talking about where we have multiple propaganda wings pointing at each other as the sources.
Yeah, okay, so I mean, China, does China give a number of how many people they put in these facilities or whatever?
Oh yeah, but it's really low. It's like 20, you know what I mean? It's like not, so we'll get into like the inconsistencies with the stories that come out. So in addition to Radio Free Asia, the weird story also broke with the assistance of a man named Adrian Zenz. And Adrian Zenz, if you've never heard of him, is a very interesting character. He is a fundamentalist end-time apocalyptic Christian who hates gay people and believes children should be beaten. And he also said that he was led by God to fight China, that is his one goal in life, is to fight China. And he said this way before he ever did this reporting. So
Mhm.
Zenz appeared to become an expert in Xinjiang out of nowhere, overnight, after being employed by, and you cannot make this up, the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation.
Oh, these are the people who do the signs.
Which signs?
The one I told you about this when
Oh,
we did
like
the
the
Comic-Con.
billboards?
Like there's one in Chicago and they're trying and like Chinatown in Chicago that's like over so many people saved from like communism. And so like, it's got one of the rolling tickers on it.
Yes.
Uh,
Okay. This makes sense. And for anybody who doesn't know, when you hear people say like millions of people have died under communism, these figures go back to this thing called the Little Black Book. And the Little Black Book has been wildly debunked as being extremely anti Semitic because the figures of the people, first of all, there's like, it was written by multiple people, and all but one of the people who wrote it have since denounced it and been like, this was a shit show. This should not have happened. The figures they include things like speculative birth declines, which like doesn't even make sense, like potential people who weren't born they include, but more than that, they include the deaths of any Nazis during World War II. Yeah, during World War II, the USSR
which I'm just like
defeated
maybe
the
I'm just gonna
Nazis.
go ahead and say that kind of tells you whose side they're on.
Well, yeah, and that's why all the memes are like looking at the victims of communism or the Little Black Book, and you're like, what the fuck? These are all Nazis.
Hmm.
They are all. It's a lot of them.
So wait, I gotta ask, do they include like the biggie, like the like Hitler's, the people at like the Nuremberg trial?
Probably too, because they just include bullshit numbers without specifics. I mean, it's been wildly debunked. So this
Yeah.
book, and it's really anti-Semitic. It's like on some Holocaust denier level bullshit. Like it is bad. It is bad, bad, bad. So whatever. Zenz is working for the Victims of Communism Memorial Fund, which is tied in all with these groups of people who come up with this weird bullshit. And overnight, he's like, yes, I was led by God to fight China. And guess what? Now all of a sudden, I know everything about Xinjiang. And this corresponded with the Victims of Communism Memorial Fund's finances going up 600% in 2018 as the United States entered a trade war with China, correlating with, yes, the release of the Uyghur Story.
Mm-hmm.
So, the United States trade war with China, we throw a bunch of money at this bogus Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation. This right-wing religious fanatic Zenz comes about as like, oh, pick me. I was led by God to fight China. And then he overnight is like, yep, now I know everything about China. BT dubs, here's a story about them being Nazis. Haha. And it just comes out overnight and it's released through the US propaganda networks like Radio Free Asia. And it is backed by the World Uyghur Congress by people like Omer Kanat, who had previously worked for Radio Free Asia. And he himself is like, I actually don't know where these numbers come from. The West just told me it was 1 million. So it's got to be 1 million.
So just as like do a sum up of where we are right now, some asshole guy, Adrian Zenz, was like, holy shit, this Uyghur thing is happening because what? Like
We'll get into like what we know, kind of, yeah.
It seems like what's really happening is the United States or like Western capitalist type corporate power, right, is involved in a giant trade war over who's going to have economic influence in the Pacific.
Yes.
And in order to stoke up some nationalism and some like
Anti-China
bullshit,
sentiment. Yep.
right? They're like, hey, because like the thing is like if you're like a good liberal whatever person, you don't want ethnic minorities to be like genuinely.
I'm gonna say most people, yeah, do not want ethnic cleansing.
Well, except for the
Not
like the little black book motherfuckers who are like
who are like it's so sad all those Nazis
or that like Ukrainian chick, like she's
right, the literal Nazis or the Zionists.
Yeah.
Most people who aren't Nazis or Zionists don't want ethnic cleansing to be occurring, and they care. They care.
Yeah.
They're like, oh my God, if this is happening, this is terrible. But it never occurs to them. It's like, well, you gotta wait, this is like, we really gotta check the sources on this because I'm sorry, who is this guy? And they're all citing each other in a circle. And like, how is like I see evidence of what's happening in Gaza and the West Bank every single day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am seeing
it's not
it is a genocide occurring. I am seeing it in real time, you know?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like there should be this is so many people, 1 million people. We should be seeing evidence of this. And I'm going to get into some of the quote unquote evidence that we have. And the more you learn about the stuff, you're just like, oh my God, this is horrifying. And this reminds me of, there was another thing about Xinjiang they tried to run before this about Xinjiang cotton picking. Well, the cotton picked in Xinjiang was picked by slaves. And I remember this woman was fighting with me on my TikTok. She was like, "Did you make clothes out of cotton?" And I was like, "Sometimes I make clothes out of every fiber." And she's like, "How do you know they weren't sourced by slaves in Xinjiang?" And I was like, I mean, they weren't sourced by slaves in Xinjiang. Like, the cotton's not from Xinjiang. Like, what? And then like fighting with me. I shit you not. I go look at her profile. She has her LinkedIn in her bio, and she is literally working for Ned. And I'm like, and I called her out so hard and she blocked me. I was like, are you kidding? You are literally funded by the State Department to say this. Like, you put your LinkedIn in your bio, like make a sock puppet account or something, babe. Like, this is wild.
Well, no, because they're like, right, because it's like, if people buy the National Endowment for Democracy line, like the like is in the name kind of line, they're like, well, she works for the thing that's like pro-democracy. And they're not like,
it's not suspicious to them, right? Well, okay, so back to Zen's. The year before the story broke, 2018, his publications were released pretty much only by this place called the Jamestown Foundation, which is a conservative anti-communist think tank launched by CIA Director William Casey in the 80s.
I actually, as we were talking, I Googled this guy and I was like, why is everything fucking Jamestown? Or like, because I know about them. And I was like, wait, what the fuck?
Well, and that's the thing. You start seeing this and you're like, oh, these are career propagandists.
Yeah.
Like, that's their job. They get into these propaganda wings and they just kind of go from one to another, and they kind of bolster, each division bolsters each other's quote unquote credibility. So Zen cites primarily, you would probably guess, Radio Free Asia in his reports.
So it's like circular citation. This is,
exactly. So, and remember, the guy who's the head of that one NGO that's funded by Ned, he used to work at Radio Free Asia, and he's like, well, I'm getting my figures from Western news sources, and Western news sources are like, we're getting our figures from Radio Free Asia. And it's like, well, the Radio Free Asia guy said he was getting it from you. So Zen's himself, wackadoo guy, real wackadoo. He has been caught making some very bizarre claims. He said, for example, that practicing Islam is illegal in Xinjiang. Like he said, anyone in Xinjiang who engages in any type of religious practice, anyone who even has a single Quran verse saved on their mobile phone will be subjected to a brutal process of re-education without trial. But this is one of those things where it's like, you don't even have to look a lot. There are many open and practicing mosques in Xinjiang, and Muslim organizations online even have guidelines for how to go visit and how to go pray at these places. Like, nobody's even trying to hide this. This is very like, of course, you can legally practice Islam in Xinjiang.
I ask a logistics question?
Yeah.
I don't think it would be worth it, right? Like to engage in a massive, like, right, like the amount of resources expended on like a massive campaign of like persecute, like, I feel like it would just be too many resources. Like if you're China, you'd be like, wow, this is kind of.
Yeah. I mean, maybe, it's not like religious wars haven't happened in the past that people have.
No, I know, I get that.
Persecution.
I feel like they right, we would know about it, I think is.
Well, and there wouldn't be mosques with open hours and websites on the internet being like, come on in, come practice Islam with us, right? If it was this illegal thing that would get you killed or sent to re-education camps.
Well, that's pro-Chinese propaganda.
I'm a paid Chinese propagandist.
Wait, are you?
I'm getting that.
Where's my fucking paycheck?
I know, right? You got to catch up. So Zen's also claimed that all mosques had been destroyed in the region, but you can just look at like satellite images. If you don't want to go to Xinjiang, you can literally just look at like satellite images, and you could see many people coming in and out of mosques all day long in the region. They are also open to international travels. You yourself can go to Xinjiang and go into a mosque and see people practicing Islam, and see that these mosques were not destroyed. He also provided photos showing supposed evidence of like re-education camps or something, but the metadata on the images all showed that they had been edited by him, that he doctored the images, like linked to his IP address, and everybody was like, what? Like, we could see you did this. And additional photos provided were like, he was like, this is a re-education camp. They were literally like, this is a school, this is an apartment building, these are office buildings, this was a 5-star hotel. Like, everybody who looked at these pictures were like, there's a re-education camp inside of a 5-star hotel. Like, I don't understand. So
That sounds sick. You're going like
free stay.
if you are going to a 5-star hotel and you're getting a free education, I'm just saying.
Okay. Zenz also asserted that the Chinese government inserted between 800 and 1,400 IUDs each year in Xinjiang. But the way that per capita somehow these figures were kept, which doesn't even make sense. And
wait, I like you birth control.
Yes.
Okay, I wanted to make sure that like I hadn't like missed like an I like
no, birth control and IUD, but like the figures were all weird. And when someone really dug into what he was saying, like didn't even make sense, they were like, okay, by your math, every single woman in Xinjiang is getting 4 to 8 IUDs implanted every single day.
Look, that's just how good the healthcare is there.
Like I get them done once every 10 years. People hate it.
I hear they're quite painful.
Yeah, Zen's also now suddenly after this, he was like, I'm a China scholar. He just started self-identifying.
Yeah, that's how he.
Yeah,
like,
we love a delusional icon.
When I Googled him.
Is that what it says when you Google it?
Yeah, like his like the little like AI generated like this guy was like Uyghur and China scholar or some shit.
Okay. Well, his only teaching experience was at right-wing religious schools.
Mm-hmm.
So it'd be like basically if a guy who taught you at Fresno Christian all of a sudden was like, I'm a China scholar. And you're like, where did you money?
I mean, like I get like thinking back on, you know, like my sex ed teacher like was very, very proud of never having had sex. This feels right.
Yeah, this does kind of check out, honestly.
Yeah.
He also, if you're wondering what else Zenz is up to, real wacky ideas. And again, just the anti-Semitism. It's weird how much anti-Semitism, like Nazi shit, is wrapped up in anti-communism, especially when I'm like, I don't think most people associate Judaism with communism. So why is everybody who hates communism also somehow a Nazi? Like, I do not understand this, but whatever. So this is what Zen says. He thinks that Jews who refuse to convert to evangelical Christianity during the end times are going to be refined in a fiery furnace, quote.
That doesn't have echoes of bad things that have historically happened.
No, definitely not sounding real Nazi shit, is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So another source for the story outside of Zenz and Radio Free Asia is the Chinese Human Rights Defenders. So that's the name of the group, which if you heard it, you'd be like, oh my God, it's a human rights organization of Chinese people who are concerned about what's happening in their country. I don't want Chinese people to suffer in their country. No, that is actually an organization that is just funded by the US government through, again, Ned. Yeah. Their claims, their paper that's cited as though it's fact, how we got to the 1 million figure that Radio Free Asia was reporting and that guy who worked for Radio Free Asia was reporting. The way they got to 1 million people is they had just like a candid, casual conversation with 8 people, and then they say they extrapolated the figure to 1 million.
Those must be 8 very well-informed people, I am very sure.
It's fascinating. So meanwhile, the Turkish leader Recep Erdogan, who's a strong Turkish nationalist, in 2019 claimed the people of China's Xinjiang region live happily in peace and prosperity. And they are, you know, the Uyghurs are closely related to Turkish Muslims.
Yeah.
So this is like, he was basically like, what? Like they're fine there. These are our people. They're okay. So former U.S. Deputy Chief of Mission in Beijing and Assistant Secretary of Defense Chaz Freeman say in the current atmosphere, we should be especially skeptical about any and all assertions by people who have become part of the current anti-China campaign in the West. Before we condemn, we should be sure of our facts. And Ned's goal in doing all this, in inventing all these facts or blowing things out of proportion or deliberately misconstruing things, hiring wackadoos like Zenz to just like say shit, right? Their goal is to incite Xinjiang independence along with Hong Kong independence and Tibet independence. And that's why I think we should do an episode about Free Tibet, because the Free Tibet movement is largely funded and backed by Ned. So it's, again, I mentioned this, but it's worth noting under Marxist-Leninist leadership, marginalized groups have the right to self-governance and self-determination, which contributes to how Xinjiang, Hong Kong, and Tibet function within the context of a broader China. And NED is the main source of funding for these Xinjiang independence organizations. Like, NED claims to have provided 8.75 million US dollars of grants for various Uyghur organizations between 2004 and 2020, trying to incite like independence efforts. And in 2020 alone, various Xinjiang independence forces received around 1.24 million US dollars of grants from NED. And the bulk of that was channeled into, again, specifically Xinjiang independence organizations like the World Uyghur Congress. Which I'm pretty sure is the same organization. I'm going to scroll up in my notes. Yeah, that's the same organization that was headed by Omar Kanat, who was the guy who worked for Radio Free Asia.
The one who was like, I got these statistics from the West. They got them.
Yes. And they got them from talking to 8 people and just making up numbers from there. So none of this is even, if you're like, this sounds like a conspiracy, this can't be true. Absolutely not a conspiracy. And NED President Carl Gershman will tell you that. He openly calls for color revolution to happen in China to foster a regime change. He's like, heck yeah, we're trying to get Xinjiang independence. Heck yeah, we're trying to manipulate everybody into thinking that Xinjiang can't be a part of China and there's all the suppression going on. Like, of course we're doing that. We're trying to overthrow the Chinese government. Duh.
But okay, you would think CIA little brother might be like a little more savvy.
But no, remember, because their whole thing was they're like, nobody can bust us if we're just really open about everything we're doing, which is why it's so shocking that they removed all the documentation from the Ukraine grants. Because
they were just like, oh, it's so bad.
Yeah, the Ukraine stuff must be so bad because their whole point is that they're like, we have no shame. We'll tell you everything. Yes, we're trying to stage a color revolution. Yes, we're trying to overthrow the Chinese government. Yes, we're manipulating data and what happens in Xinjiang in an effort to try to incite like a global movement towards Xinjiang independence. So 3 places I talked about, right, were Xinjiang, Tibet, which I think we need to do a whole episode about, and then Hong Kong. Yeah. So of course, this means that NED has been active in Hong Kong, trying to get independence from Hong Kong too. And NED President Gershman called China a resurgent despotic regime, tightening repression internally and expanding its power globally, and claimed that democracy is under threat in China, and we, NED, the United States, the CIA, must come to its defense, right? So this is kind of what Gershman is thinking when he's like, heck yeah, we're trying to do the Xinjiang independence and overthrow the government of China. Yeah, and he's trying in Hong Kong as well. So starting in the late 1990s, NED poured millions of dollars into Hong Kong to fuel anti-China sentiment there, much like they did in Ukraine to fuel anti-Russia sentiment. So mostly revolving around this affiliate group called the National Democratic Institute, or the NDI, is what this all went through. So since 1997, the NDI published 18 assessment reports aimed at influencing Hong Kong's quote-unquote democratic development, which we said this in the first episode. When you hear democracy in this, just think neoliberal, pro-business,
private property, free enterprise, all that shit.
Private freedom for property rights. Yeah. So in 2002, the NDI opened an office in Hong Kong and began meddling in elections there and encouraging protests and fomenting rebellion amongst Hong Kongers. In 2004, it funded the participation of opposition parties and groups at workshops and seminars and provided personal counseling on campaign skills for their leaders of these opposition parties. The next year, in 2005, it ran a young political leaders program to support emerging political groups in trying to fight the government. They're like, hey, don't you guys want to overthrow the government of China? Like, work with us. Yeah. In 2007, it divided its activities in Hong Kong into 4 formal programs because by this point, they started showing up since the 90s. It's been like a decade or whatever. So they had a series of reports entitled The Promise of Democratization in Hong Kong. They also included a survey of perceptions, the youth's public engagement, women's political participation. And in 2008, they finally organized a summit for students to try to get students on board with this like independent Hong Kong thing. In 2010, it plotted together with opposition members of the Legislative Council, which were called like LegCo, a 5-district referendum to be passed. And in 2012, it funded Hong Kong University opening a Design Democracy Hong Kong website, which recruited university students, and they recruited interns from the university and then used that to fund the summit for students to try to get them on board with what NED was doing. And by 2014, they were directing and funding the opposition and young radical movement in orchestrating the Occupy Central movement. So all the protests you saw in 2014 in Hong Kong. So, media in the US since 2014, going up all the way into 2019, was reporting there was like a pro-democracy movement fighting for freedom against a repressive Chinese government in Hong Kong. And these protests started because a Hong Kong government official proposed an amendment to an extradition treaty between Hong Kong, Macau, China, and Taiwan. So people in Hong Kong were like, well, if you allowed extradition to China, we're worried we could become political prisoners if we critique the Chinese government. So Hong Kong, it's worth noting for anybody who doesn't know, is technically China, but it is run autonomously because of a contract between China and Britain. Basically, Hong Kong was Britain's last colony. It was a colony of Britain, and it was returned, quote unquote, to China in 1997 with provisions to have 50 years of self-governance. So Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam then withdrew the extradition bill after the protests, but the protests still continued. We now know that Ned funded leaders of the 2019 protests in Hong Kong in an effort to prolong the movement. So that's why when Carrie Lam was like, okay, you guys don't like this thing, I'm just going to withdraw. We don't have to worry about that. We're done. The protests kept happening because Ned was like, no, keep protesting. Find more things to protest about.
So this is something that I keep thinking, right? Which is like, there are like, right, you've said this about a dozen other things, but like sometimes people don't like their government. They protest.
Sometimes people don't like their government. That's totally fine. There's a Beijing punk rock movement where they complain about their government. Like,
yeah,
allowed to dislike their government or things about their government. Something really cool about Cuba is they have community meetings where people complain about their government to each other all the time. Like, people can dislike their government.
Right. So like it does seem like there was like a genuine thing about which they were like some people, not like every person who lives in Hong Kong, but like some people in Hong Kong were like, that might not, I might not like that. And they did protest. This is genuine protests.
Yep.
Initially, that then just became like, right,
But it's worth noting the reason why they were like, oh no, an extradition treaty with China could harm me is because they were coming off of over a decade of Ned doing propaganda and focusing on students who mostly led the protests, and telling the people who were leading the protests, like, China's your enemy, China is bad, China's gonna fuck with you, China, bad. So they come to these conclusions, who knows if even organically, to have this fear of the extradition.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like, right,
we can't know. We don't know.
There's like a conversation to be had about like what organic persuasion is, right? Like,
true.
So it's like, well, they come to these conclusions. They can be misinformed or well-informed as we like, but these are
manipulated, or just from within their brains deep somewhere. Who knows where thoughts come from?
Yeah, like maybe they're just right. Like, who knows? Right. Like that seems like a side issue to like whether or not they're like they genuinely.
I mean, I assume that the influencing is working. Otherwise, the U.S. government wouldn't be pumping millions of dollars into trying to influence people's thoughts and actions. So I do think the manipulation is a core part of it, because the United States is trying to puppeteer the whole world, and I think it does play into it. But you were right to say there was a specific grievance that had a potential very finite solution that they were advocating for, and the government was like, you got it, we're going to do your finite solution.
Yeah, right. Like, so like the Hong Kong government was like, look, we proposed it, you guys didn't like it, we're not doing it.
Right, received.
But like so Ned's role was like, oh, we see something, we see like a thing happening that we didn't do initially.
Right.
Let's get in on this.
Let's get in on it. So what do? They try to prolong the protests, and they end up getting to the point where the protesters are waving American flags and asking the United States to come like liberate them.
So that seems like that's brain.
It's pretty, that's very obviously something that Ned funded in these revolution leaders, because who was ever waving a flag like, come take us over? I mean, I say that, me and China though. I said it at the end of the last episode, China, come on, let's go.
Belton Road. All across Los Angeles, just, you know what? Replace the 10 with Belton Road.
I also not out in the streets waving like a China flag, so it's like a little much to me.
The other thing is, like, you have to imagine if you're like the whatever like Ned guy or like person at Ned was like, oh, we're gonna get in on this, and you're like, guys, you gotta be like a little less obvious about this, like that. Like, listen, I don't know, like maybe not this much.
Right.
Like you're going a
Maybe.
little hard.
Well, and then it wasn't even just the United States. At one point, the protesters broke into the Hong Kong state legislature and rehung the British colonial flag. They're like, we want to be owned by Britain again, I think. So they're waving American flags and then they're breaking in and they're like, no, we want to be owned by Britain. And it was like a mess. And then some protesters were also seen carrying Pepe the Frog posters and like the alt-right Pepe the Frog symbol.
The little cartoon frog. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and Ned does, we know, publicly grant documents for the funding of these Hong Kong protests. And one of the documents says the organization and its partner will leverage their extensive existing network to support exiled activists and to sustain and grow activist communities remaining in Hong Kong. So they're very explicit about this. They're like, we're giving these people money to try to influence people and manipulate people into having protest efforts and getting more people in Hong Kong to protest against China. They also said in this document they were going to strengthen regional and international support for pro-democracy movements, again, pro-American Western business, which has waving the American flags and the British colonial flags, by enacting a propaganda-based PR campaign in support of Hong Kong protesters. So that means here in the United States, where everybody was like, look at these brave Hong Kong freedom protesters. That's where it was coming from. Ned was like, we're going to do that. We're going to do this propaganda and make everybody in the US love the Hong Kong protesters. And some of the leaders they funded included Joshua Wong, who continuously comes to the United States to meet Marco Rubio. Like the Florida Senator, Marco Rubio. I don't understand that one. He also has his own political party that closely aligns with Ned. They also funded Jimmy Lai, who is called the Rupert Murdoch of Asia, who is a devotee and close friend of none other than Milton Friedman. He also funded, Jimmy Lai did, the 2014 Umbrella Revolution in Hong Kong, and he uses his media sources to publish xenophobic writings against Chinese people, just like weird stuff about China. He has also regularly met with White House senior officials, including John Bolton, who organized regime change attempts in Venezuela.
Oh, John, I remember like John Bolton, like every China expert. This was the funny thing about the Trump era, which is like a lot of ideas that were politically disastrous but mainstream because they came in under like under the Trump banner. People suddenly found like the courage to be like, that's some fucking dumb shit. And John Bolton was one of those things where it was like, true, it's dumb shit. This has been politically mainstream for decades.
Right, exactly. So John Bolton, king of dumb shit, is doing things like meeting with this guy Jimmy Lai, ostensibly to talk about regime change, because that's what Ned says they're trying to do in China. They're trying to stage a coup and overthrow China, and they're getting Jimmy Lai on their side to do it. They're paying him to do it. So according to the Ned website, in the year 2020 alone, $2 million were spent on 11 specific Hong Kong related projects. So this includes strengthening citizen election observation, which offered technical and financial assistance to these newly formed groups in Hong Kong that were literally created in an effort to destabilize and make like the government feel illegitimate there and encourage them to obstruct elections by any means possible, including election monitoring.
So this is not election, well, this is like shady election monitor.
Yeah, exactly. So this is like sketchy election monitoring. And again, this is where you see you're like, National Endowment for Democracy is literally like National Endowment against democracy. We don't want people voting for anything we don't like. And if you think it stops there, like, no, it even goes to our allies in the UK between 2017 and 2022. Ned gave £2.6 million to UK media groups, which included Bellingcat, who's known mainly for its investigations of Russian Secret Service operations. And they also gave money to Open Democracy, which is one of Britain's most visited independent news sites. And the goal that they cited was to recruit and train young emerging writers, thinkers, and leaders from the Middle East to write substantive articles related to democratic developments in the region. So basically, from the UK, they were trying to learn people from what we call the Middle East, right, to basically talk shit on their government.
Okay, so was this like British-born folks from like from South Asia or Southeast Asia.
I mean, it could be, but it could also be people not born in the UK who just like were in the UK, or like UK media groups like recruiting people from these
I see.
locations. And the UK government didn't know. They like did an investigative report and they were like, oh, has the CIA been meddling with us? And then they did
Wait,
this
but
report.
this is
They're like,
when
oh,
would it when did it come out? It was like during the Obama administration where it came out that we've been wiretapping all of like the major EU countries. Do you remember that? Like where it was like, oh, someone had been wiretapping Angela Merkel,
yes.
right? Where it's like, what you guys like
Oh yeah, we're
like
wiretapping everybody. We're all up in everybody's business. We're
but
spying
this
on
is
everyone.
I feel like one of two things is happening. A, when it comes out, everyone has to feign naivety about it and be
Yeah.
like, what? You mean to tell us you've been wiretap? Like, you mean to tell us you've been funding like these weird like front organizations?
Yeah.
Or they are like everyone is the stupidest person in the world because this is not like it's like the
No, it's like the thing that's so insulting is that it's like so obvious they don't switch up the playbook enough. It's like the same old thing over and over and over again. And if you look into it even a little, it's pretty easy to figure out. But it's just like nobody's doing that. So it's all you know what I
so
mean?
every time it comes out and they have to do like a big investigative piece, it's like right, like the journalist is like, wait, I thought my job was gonna be hard.
Yeah.
Like, I just went on the National Endowment for Democracy website and I found a bunch of people saying we did it.
This is what we're doing. Yeah, we did it. No, exactly. But that was always the whole point of the National Endowment for Democracy. They're like, there's no big news story if we just tell them from the jump we're doing it. And if you wonder what the National Endowment for Democracy is up to today, well, still maintaining those previously stated activities, but also pretty active in Indonesia. In 2023, Ned was caught laying the groundwork for a color revolution in Indonesia. Joko Widodo was the first Indonesian leader not drawn from the country's like previously established political or military elite. And it's worth noting, Indonesia didn't become independent from the Dutch until 1949, right? It was a colonized place. It was heavily exploited by Western interests. And Joko Widodo was born and raised in a slum, right? He became mayor of his hometown in 2005. In 2012, he became governor. And 2 years later, he was president. So this was the first guy who was president who wasn't like part of just kind of this elite military political history in Indonesia. And he started pursuing a left-wing agenda pretty fast because he was like a regular guy. So he was like, I want universal health care. I want economic growth. I want radical infrastructure development. I want material improvements to the lives of the average citizens. And people loved him. Very, very popular. 80% approval rating. I'm pretty sure the approval rating for US presidents is always like 26% or something like that.
Well, I mean, it's like I feel like US presidents are like lucky if they get above half at this point.
Right.
Right. I will say also, right, like I think I've mentioned this a couple of times when we've talked about this stuff. Indonesia did have like mass killing thing that started in 65 that was largely organized by the CIA.
Right.
And so this is not new and it was over like modest land reforms and like the kind of like picayune center left things that probably wouldn't have in a like large scale damage to the US economy or anything like that. But it was just like inconvenient.
No, it's true. Yeah. The things the United States has done in Jakarta or in Jakarta, sorry, in Indonesia, like
Well, Jakarta and Indonesia.
right. But Indonesia abroad, yeah, it's pretty shocking. So yeah, just as recently as 2023, though, we're still up to our same shenanigans, right? This guy's got an 80% approval rating. He wants to do pretty moderate left-wing things, healthcare, economic growth, whatever. He also pushed for Palestinian liberation. So Ned prepared for Widodo to leave office by reaching out to who they considered to be emerging leaders in the country, graduates of Ned training programs that they'd had their eyes on for years, that they had been working with, who now had become prominent members of like lots of political parties there, and also who were leading local NGOs and civil society organizations. This really reminds me of Haiti in a lot of ways, but they waited for Widodo to leave office rather than overthrowing. So many 2024 candidates were taught campaigning and voter engagement strategies by Ned. And Ned also taught them how to challenge results of elections if they didn't get what they wanted, which just sounds just like Haiti. Sounds just like Haiti. So representatives met with high-ranking members of the U.S. Embassy in Jakarta, including its political officer, Ted Meinhover. He, quote, conveyed U.S. concerns about the 2024 elections, in particular how Defense Minister Prabowo Subianto's electability had increased dramatically, meaning he stood a high chance, according to polling, right, of being the successor for Widodo. So Ned supported then protest efforts in the following months against him. And in February, months after being exposed with these plannings, the Indonesian election ended up going off without a hitch. But this didn't even stop them. Like, people in Indonesia are like, we see what you're doing here. Like, you're trying to compromise and undermine democracy here to put your guys in charge. So the elections ended up going off fine, but that didn't mean that Ned pulled out. In 2024, $300 million was requested in annual funding for Ned operations, including in places like, yes, Indonesia.
Okay.
So this is kind of what got us up to today. And like, the interesting thing about Ned or the CIA is like, one, it shouldn't even exist. It's so beyond amoral for us to be intervening in other countries like this, but also like spreading democracy has just become a euphemism for destroying the world. And like, again, it's one of those things that's so obvious it's not even clever or funny.
I mean, I think, you know, it's one of those weird things where you kind of have to hand it to like Kissinger's real politics thing, in the sense that it's like, I mean, you are acting in the most amoral, fucked up way, but your cynicism at least has the benefit of honesty, right? Like, and because it feels like I don't give a fuck about democracy. I'm just in it to like make sure that like power politics remains like smooth for US interests. That's honest, and that's what Ned is doing, that's what the CIA does. And so it's, you know, I for some reason I kept getting that goddamn Jenny Holzer like abuse of power comes as no surprise t-shirt thing in my head.
Thing.
It was on like t-shirts in like the 90s.
Oh, okay.
Which also Jenny Holzer at some point collaborated with the Dallas Cowboys, which is very funny to me.
That's very weird.
Jenny Holzer's that's a topic in itself.
Yeah.
But in any case, the like the abuse of power comes as no surprise, because it's like, well, why should we be surprised by this? I feel like the thing I've said over and over as you've been explaining this is like, I don't feel like at this point we all know the script.
Right.
Like, don't be shocked, don't be a schmuck.
Right. No, it's true. Like, I think that, well, there's some like kind of conclusionary things that I think are interesting to note about this. Like, when you explore the relationship between foreign money, which would be like American investment in another country, and democracy, we find like there's no correlation. Like, you're not going to have more like quote unquote democracy just because Americans show up with money there. Like, one researcher's multivariate analysis of the impact of US aid on quote unquote democratization in a sample from 1975 to 2000 of countries that like received aid found absolutely no evidence that there was any correlation between that money promoting democracy, which like, duh. It's like you said, it's like, yeah, obviously, because that's not what they're trying to do. Another found evidence that human rights and democracy play a role in arms sales decisions, but little evidence that those decisions are linked to democracy, you know? So it'll be like more like, the thing that matters the most is you have to look democratic, quote unquote, enough for it to feel okay for the US to sell you guns.
This is what I'm saying. Like,
yeah,
get like some graphic designers in there, and you get a
t-shirts.
lot of National Endowment for Democracy funding. If you like happen to live in some country with like where America is like eyeing a pipeline, or maybe there's like some minerals that America might want to exploit.
Maybe the only way to get paid as an artist today is to be paid by the CIA or Ned or the State Department. That's the way to make a living as an artist.
No long leash. We're done with long leaches.
It's just a like, very short taut leash with a choke collar on it. Another kind of report found that US military intervention is shockingly, yes, not linked to increased levels of democracy. Wow, who would have thought? Another found that the more Ned intervened in the country, actually, the less democracy, the country had, either because of regime changes backed by Ned to support Western interests, or because democratically elected leaders there felt forced to tighten the reins on their government once they felt the impact of US intervention trying to overthrow them. So it's either like the US came in and they're like, we're overthrowing you, we're doing it our way, dictator, or the country was like, the US is coming in trying to overthrow us, get them out of here, we got to do things our way, I got to be a dictator now. And also worth noting, the CIA itself in internal documents often remarks that communism and socialism are both democratic systems. They're often like, oh, the American people don't know this, but actually there is democracy in socialism and communism. We just make them think there's not. So attempting to instill democracy, right, by overthrowing what we perceive to be socialism is inherently contradictory. Like there's no way you can even kind of pretend like this stuff is real, basically. And Ned is really interesting because some Republicans even hate Ned, which is fascinating to me. Like in 1984, this one Republican congressman commented on Ned and said, Ned is a loose cannon in international politics. Giving pots of money to private groups to run their own foreign policy invites trouble. No consultation with the State Department or observers on the scene is required. Nothing prevents them from working at cross purposes with our personnel abroad or even with each other. Because of their government funding, any mistakes will be blamed on the US. The best way to lose friendships abroad is to set up international political action committees to meddle in their internal affairs. And I like, that's totally the thing. Like, even if you're like an I love America, I love money guy, you're like, it's actually this, like the same thing that happened with the CIA, where it's like you have to declassify all these documents. Like basically the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. And Ned is like a further extension of that with even less oversight than the CIA. So like other government guys are like the Republican congressman from the 80s is like, this is getting a little out of hand,
I mean, it seems like Ned is sort of like a drunk guy with a gun. Like that's the
Yes,
vibe.
that is 100% the vibe. Yes.
Where it's just like, we're going in there, we're gonna shoot some shit. We'll find out what happens when the dust is settled.
Yeah, well, this Congress guy, he actually said that Ned was a tax-supported endowment for mischief.
Honestly, that sounds awesome, right?
I know, but it's like, it's our money. It's like, we don't get healthcare, we don't get schools, we don't get buses, we don't get trains, we don't get any of the shit because Ned's the drunk guy at the party with a gun.
Yeah.
And we bought it. We bought him a shiny new gun and a case full of beer.
It seems that sucks.
Yeah, it sucks. That's
at least don't buy it. Like, make the motherfucker buy his own beer. Get that guy into the drug dealing game.
You know what he should do? He should probably find a way to sell drugs to Iran and then use that money, or sell guns to Iran and then use that money to fund drug smugglers in Nicaragua and then allow them entry to the United States in exchange for doing their bidding. That's how they should be funded.
Yeah, that's
the good old fashioned.
I am old fashioned that way.
Call me old fashioned. I think you need to exchange guns and drugs for funding for your espionage campaigns.
Pull yourself up by your fucking bootstraps.
Nobody wants to work anymore.
Yeah.
That's it. Well, that's the episode on Ned. You got anything else you want to add?
No, I think that we got it.
I think we did it.
Thanks so much for listening to another episode of Pick Me Up, I'm Scared. If you would like to join us on Patreon, you can find us there at patreon.com/pickmeupimscared. For $3 a month, you can access bonus content there. But if $3 a month is too much for you to spend right now, we totally get it, and we're just happy you're here. As always, you can find the sources for this week's episode just by scrolling down a bit in the description.